His video always
Yeah.
concerns me.
Mm-hmm. Trying to get to it. Kevin, can you, thank you.
That was a weird picture.
Well, it's always unsettling. I'm never sure what's gonna pop up.
Okay, all right. Okay, is the table ready?
You're right.
We'll start the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Start off the meeting with public comments. Anyone has any comments that are not on the agenda for today, because we'll open each item up for comments as we go through. So, anyone in the physical audience? Anyone in the Zoom audience? I'm just giving it a second more because we're still admitting a few people. I will just make the comment to bear with us today. Christina is out for bereavement today, and then we have a couple of staff out sick today, so Kevin and I are running the meeting. So Kevin mostly, but I'm co-hosting, so if there's a delay, that's why. Bear with us on that. All right, so if we don't have anyone, we can move on to number 2, emergency management, Ram Island road raising, high rescue water vehicle notification system. We have Chief Reed here to present.
Thank you for having me at the meeting today. I did prepare a few slides that Kevin's going to go through, mostly to keep me on task, but as the board knows collectively, besides my hat as the chief of police, you also appoint me annually as the emergency management coordinator for the town. And so with that said, I just wanted to go over or discuss a few things, and mostly what this is going to be about is the town's hazard mitigation plan. We've had a hazard mitigation plan for close to 20 years. Our current plan is up for review and reinstatement. And I had sent the board collectively last week some discussion points on that, and most of it I'll cover in a meeting today. So what I would like to do is kind of do a slight review of our 2020 plan to give you a better feel for hazard mitigation. And in that discussion, I'm going to talk a little bit about an example of the Ram Island roadway elevation, the multi-purpose vehicle that we had talked about, and then look forward to the 2025 plan, which will take us most of this year to put together, and then conclude with the notify me. So Kevin, if you don't mind, I'm going to be on slide 3 right now. Great. And so, I always thought, what is hazard mitigation? And really, the largest takeaway from this slide is it's an evaluation of our hazards and then a strategy or putting together a plan to try to mitigate those hazards. One of the things that came up through the Disaster Mitigation Act of 2000 was that FEMA said, if you want disaster recovery money, going forward, you have to have a hazard mitigation plan. And largely, that's why the town got involved with this close to 20 years ago. So that whether the disaster is here or elsewhere in the state, there's often money streams that open up, and we then have the opportunity to acquire some of that money. And our grant writer does an excellent job of keeping us informed of that. And gives us access to that money as it's available throughout the state. So if there was an ice storm up in Buffalo and money pools opened up to mitigate hazards, we could then apply for any hazards that would be associated with whatever is opened up at the time. So it's a regional update, and on the most local level, our township, but it also includes going from the bottom, villages, towns, the county, and the county is the spirit on this. New York State Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Services, DISHES, and FEMA. So at the end, when we look to have our plan approved, FEMA and both DISHES would approve our plans. So if you can go to the next slide, Kevin. So we've, what I'm saying now is we've begun in this meeting and in my ask to the town board, is that we're in our 4th version now, and we've begun that process, right? This is kind of our local kickoff to that process. Over the next year and in these next couple of weeks, I'd like to establish the committee. In past years, we've had, and I have a few here, besides myself, the town engineer involved, the highway superintendent, a representative of the town board, our town grant writer. And then what we'll do is when we formulate that committee and pull those people in, and those are a few of them, we'd also reach out to some of the stakeholders in the plan, but they don't necessarily need to be on the committee. So I'd like to formulate a committee in the next couple of weeks and then have us move forward with working on an update to the plan. So one of the first things we do is review completed projects. So we have a plan and there were projects in the plan of which I'll go through in a little bit. We penned or we look at partially completed projects. We carry over projects into this next part and we identify new hazards if there are new hazards that the community has felt we need to address. And then we develop an updated plan, and that plan would be put forward and adopted, and then that would sit for the next 5 years. So if you go to the next slide, just to kind of take you through, if you look at 2020, one of the hazards that we identified was that Bridge Street, right, has frequent flooding episodes. In those episodes, some of the stores are inaccessible, excuse me. 114 becomes inaccessible, and we wanted to look at mitigating that going forward. Okay, so that's in our 2020 plan. Again, this is, we'll go to the next slide. And Gordon, you might appreciate this. This is looking to re-engineer bulkheading, and we work with highway on that. We identify any bulkheadings on town property or jointly owned property, and then we try to address those. One of the things that was completed in this last 5 years was the Grace's Lane bulkhead, and that's in this slide. Taking a look at some of the Shell Beach groins, we have done some work on some of those groins. When we identify these hazards, if we can put a cost estimate with the project, it takes it another step down the road. At the time, all the groins, I think, were estimated at $360,000. We've done a few of them, but not completed them all, so that probably will carry over into the following year. And the end is just showing a dilapidated bulkhead down at the end of Shell Beach. Next slide. This is a good slide to kind of highlight a little bit of the process. We found out through all of this that we can ask FEMA for money, but if we don't have certain things in place, some shovel-ready projects, then we can't move forward. And originally, FEMA wasn't given money to do engineering workups or work analysis. So we, as a town, infrequently had the money to say, we're gonna spend $200,000 and take a look at this so we can develop a plan so that when money becomes available, we can ask for it. Under the Biden administration, they put out a lot of infrastructure money, but quite frankly, we didn't have plans in place to go after some of that infrastructure money. But FEMA did change a bit and they allowed for planning. And Joe can probably talk about this a little bit better than I can, but we wanted to look at a public-private interest of ours in both North Ferry terminals that frequently flooded. And North Ferry and South Ferry have been great partners with us. They continually do their own mitigation projects. If you look at both terminals right now, they're trying to mitigate rising tides and look at adjusting their ramps at those locations as we speak. We met with them, and Joe, maybe you can just highlight this project just a little bit from an engineering perspective.
Sure, yeah. The hazard mitigation plan identified the ferries and our reliance on the ferries as a major concern because of our need to maintain supplies, transportation, et cetera. So in following through on the hazard mitigation plan, we engaged in a study to identify what are those choke points at the ferry, what are our operational limits. During Hurricane Sandy, we had a medical evacuation that we were not able to properly respond to, but fortunately, there was an ad hoc response where we were able to get residents off the island. But this study, which is now largely funded by FEMA and in partnership with the private ferry companies, analyzes soup to nuts the North and South Ferry operations. It identifies where their critical path problems are with operating in high and low water conditions, and it provides them with repair and upgrade design plans so that they can engage on these types of projects themselves. So the type of issue that we're identifying is, perhaps a lengthening of their ramps, or an increase or decrease in the approach elevations, or a regrading of the approach roadways. So we're simulating both high and low water events to make sure that the ferries can operate in extreme conditions so that we can use them for emergency services during those adverse weather conditions, and we are not fully isolated. So that's just an example of a project that was identified in the hazard plan as being a hazard to the community. It's a project that we've received outside funding on to engage with. It's a project that we have a public-private relationship and partnership now with these ferry companies, and we're ultimately giving them the tools to make some of these changes themselves, but we're also creating a pathway for those companies to secure subsequent funding if they want to take these projects on, because this plan is in place and this analysis has been completed.
And just to build on that, and again, reiterate, our partnership with both North and South Ferry is tremendous from an emergency management perspective, and I'm sure from other perspectives in the town. But in our current 2020 hazard mitigation plan, we're going to carry this over into 25, because now we'll have some planning, but if funding becomes available, it may give us another step in this process. So it's a continuing of the process. So that's why I wanted to highlight the North and South Ferry study in this. And another one that I would like to highlight again is the Elevate. We in 2020, and I think it's 5 years prior, we talked about elevating the Ram Island Road First Causeway. And some of that work has been done in the past. But again, if you look at these slides, you can see repetitive flooding at that location. So during the past 5 years, we've been looking at the causeway specifically in other areas in our community that frequently flood, and how can we mitigate this? So one of the things that we took on in the past 5 years was doing an evaluation, a survey of that area. And again, Joe was involved in this from the town's engineering point. And Joe, I'll let you speak to this slide where we're now receiving data back on elevation.
Yes, so another project or item that was identified in the plan was that we have a number of neighborhoods who, based on their geography, could become isolated because of low-lying roads. And so in following through with our hazard mitigation plan, we've embarked on an investigation to the Ram Island community, and also over in West Neck, 2 roads that can isolate respective neighborhoods during high water scenarios. This particular scope that's on the slide now is what was completed by a land surveyor to analyze the elevations throughout those portions of the road. We'll take that data now that it's back. We relate that to flood elevation planning, and we can understand how to best approach those high water situations. We can look at raising the roads during our next paving procedure, but we're able to look at this data and draw distinctions between what kind of mitigation makes sense, cost benefit, what kind of mitigation perhaps doesn't stop the flooding, but allows us to maintain emergency access. So that'll kind of feed into some of the other discussions, but that kind of gives you the range of solutions. raising a road 3 feet so that it stays dry in a hurricane is something that's cost prohibitive and it's likely not something the town could ever achieve. But understanding that some portions of the road, by raising them 6 or 8 inches, will help us gain access to, say, Little Ram, or be able to access another half a mile down the road, that we can use that information to decide how to best spend funds or best invest resources to mitigate these problems. So this is one of the areas that's been scoped, but West Neck Road is also scoped for the same thing. That's another area that we see frequent flooding, and both of those will be completed in the next couple of months. And that'll be ultimately a recommendation that feeds into the updated 25 hazard mitigation plan.
Okay, Kevin?
Questions?
Oh, sorry.
The engineering or the study, who, is that paid for by who?
So the engineering work is done in-house. That's
Okay,
me. And the contract out work, like the land surveying, this one was not grant funded. This one was allocated through the town budget.
okay,
The ferry project was the grant support from that dishes department at New York State, Homeland Security, I think.
great, thank you.
And the road raising survey was paid out of the 2024 budget. So we're still finishing up paying for it, but the funds were appropriated in the 2024 budget.
So just a continuation of mitigating the hazard of the causeways flooding, and I want to preface this part of the conversation with, I'm not here to ask for anything right now, I'm just working through the hazard mitigation process. So one of the solutions that was not approved budgetarily, because we just didn't have the money at the time, and I completely understand that, was that we were talking about mitigating this flood hazard with a high water vehicle. And although that did not pass in 25, we thought that the truck could gain 36 inches approximately of standing water and give us access at a lower cost. While that didn't pass in 25, the capital planning and grants may push that forward again in 26. And maybe over the course of the next 5-year cycle of a hazard mitigation plan, that vehicle may survive, and we could use that as a tool to mitigate the flood hazard at a lower cost, coupled with possibly some road raisings in specific spots that, if we had 100 yards where we could raise it up 12 inches, that might be the difference in us getting out to an area or not getting out to an area. So again, it's a process in the making, right? We're continually a process in the making and mitigating our hazards in the community. And that's the process where we're currently at. If you can go to the next slide, Kev. So some of the other areas in the 2020 plan, we were looking at cybersecurity, pandemic response, dam management projects, a cooling center for heated days, Crescent Beach fence stabilization. I'm just laying out some of the other things that are in there. We'll evaluate these 5 or 6 right now and see if we want to carry them into the next cycle. If you go to the next page, there's a few more. Storm shutters at our Emergency Operations Center, enhancing code changes, emergency service interoperability communications project. We did fund that. I think, was that with ARPA money? I believe where we are enhancing the police communications, we bought 800 radios over a period of time, so that money came from there. So we moved along on that project. And then retrofitting some critical infrastructures depending on accessibility and those kind of things. So if you want to see the full plan, which I did link to the board on the police department emergency preparedness page on that tab, you can see our full hazard mitigation plan. It's approximately 100 pages on that page, our current one. If we go to the next slide, in looking at the 2025 plan, some of the next steps that I'm looking for from the board is to select that mitigation committee, and I can give you some recommendation. I believe I have in that what I forwarded to the town board. That committee would then meet regularly. I would work to schedule those meetings. We would review our 2020 plan. We would do a draft update of the plan. We'd link the draft on the town media platform so that everybody can see it. The town board would ultimately review the draft, submit comments. we'd finalize the plan and submit it to FEMA and DISHES for approval. And then ultimately, we would adopt the plan in late '25. So we're on probably a 10-month schedule, early 2026 by resolution. So that is a quick, what I would call down and dirty update of our current hazard mitigation plan, tying it into some of the projects that were listed in the town's agenda. And then looking forward, going ahead in this year on getting feedback and input from the board and moving the project forward. This is not a plan that we do once every 5 years and collect dust on the shelves. We do have some of those plans. I'm not going to pretend that we don't. It's the nature of government, but this is not one. We continually refer to it in our capital planning. We, on emergency management side, we're constantly looking at it. So it is a plan that we like to have as a working plan, and it's important to the town, especially when it comes to grant funding and making application to those. So any questions on the hazard mitigation plan?
Well, Chief, you're looking for one person from the town board to be represented on this committee?
That would be great if two people wanted to be, two, that would be fine to have an alternate.
I think
did
Meg put her hand
volunteer.
up, yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm already familiar with the 2020 plan because I read it when I was working on the comp plan, so I'm totally fine working with you guys on this.
And you brought up a great point. We did, in the comp plan, we did it as an addendum. So if you look in the comp plan on the website, there's also an attachment to the same hazard mitigation plan. So I would look to the board for guidance. I think you have a feel for what we're trying to accomplish. If there's other members of the community or town government that would be important to have on that. I neglected to mention Reed Karen. He's our floodplain manager. He's been to training in the last couple of years for that specific title. And he's identified in the town code as a floodplain manager, so he should be on there, building code reasons. I would recommend that possibly the town attorney, even if we had to reach out from time to time, if not a sitting member, we could always turn out because some of the things may affect town law, town code. So, but I would, Benjamin, I would ask that you think about it and make recommendation to me. We're open to it because we want it to be the best plan we can make, and we're open to public input on it.
We can put a second board member on. We can't put three though.
Right.
I think Meg could handle it.
I mean, it's fine with me, I don't mind.
And ultimately, coming back to the board on at least a monthly basis, giving updates on where we're at.
So Jim, you need a plan in order to go get any grant money. That's really important to this whole thing. So it really is really a no-brainer to do it, get it going. Even if you don't use it, at least you have the ability of getting grant money.
And the other part is that Tetra Tech so the county went out for a grant on this. They got a grant. So they hired a subcontractor to do a portion of the work for us. Tetra Tech is the company. It's their third time doing our plan. They're very familiar with our community from that. So our lift should be relatively easy and so to speak. But I want it to always be an operational plan so that we use it as a guide. When the comp plan came up, I said, hey, take a look at this.
Yeah, it was very helpful.
Right, it's helpful in
So
that.
doing the plan, you have to have an outside, you're using an outside vendor?
Right, so the county applied for the grant on behalf of the towns and the county.
Right.
And so we have no outlay. Our outlay is in-kind services, so I'll track everybody's time. So if Meg works for us, we have an hourly rate for her, you have an hourly rate for me, and we use that to match, it's a 75-25.
Right.
75% is covered under the grant, 25 is covered by each municipality in-kind services.
But there's not an outside vendor that, like we had on the comp plan where we had an outside consultant working with you?
Yes, we do.
So the payment of that consultant is through
A county grant,
a county grant, okay, so it's not really out of tax.
no tax-based funds.
Okay, good.
Just before we go, the Notify Me, I'm just putting up again, right? Just to remind people, we are using Notify Me as a tool throughout the town so that if Graham Island First Causeway flooded out, and we thought it was gonna be flooded for more than 4 hours, we may hit all the residents, say, hey, look, you know, during this next storm, this next outage, we could have an outage, we could have no access to you. So we're trying to use Notify Me as a messaging tool for the town. I would just remind all of our residents to please try to join that. You don't have to select to get notifications on everything. If you don't want that, you can only get emergency notifications, and therefore you would be in this process. So I just wanted to remind everybody of that, Amber, and I apologize. So any direction from the board on hazard mitigation planning, I'm open to it.
I was gonna say, if another board member doesn't set up, put me down as a backup, and I'll attend as I can.
Okay.
And so I'm just thinking about people. So the committee will meet during the summer, basically from now till,
Matt, I would say, yeah, we're gonna start monthly, now, as soon as I get the next step from the county. So I would say at least monthly, you know, beginning in April, say the latest.
I mean, this one might be perfect. I don't know if they'll agree to do it, but they probably won't be available till end of May. But they could Zoom in and participate, but in person, they won't be here till probably end of May.
Yeah, so if you wanna make a recommendation, that'd be great. Benjamin, did you wanna be involved?
I think there's someone probably better suited
Right,
to this with more, applicable experience.
okay,
That's why I'm thinking of a friend of mine.
great.
Um,
How do we know if we're on notified?
If you could come up,
Well, this is just a quickie, how do we know, because I did it, but how do I check to make sure?
I'm gonna backtrack with Kevin or Christina on that. Yeah, but we'll check for you.
Okay,
Get back
because
to you.
we did it when you posted
Have
it.
you been getting messages? None?
None.
Okay.
So I don't know if we were supposed to.
We had an electric outage recently that we used it for.
I don't-
It's broad base and you didn't get it. So we'll follow up with you on that.
I just, because we did it when you had beginning of, do this before the end of, so,
Right.
yes, yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah, they may just be selecting certain tabs, you may not have
It says
selected.
I'm not signing in, if I,
Yeah, you have to sign in and then select what you
okay,
want to be
I'll
notified of.
figure it out first, but I couldn't tell if it went through. Thank you, sorry.
yeah, maybe what we can do is, next week when Christina's back, we could, just do a walkthrough.
refresher.
Yeah, for everybody, just to refresh, like, this is what you click on if you want this, yeah.
So
No,
what
it's
what
good,
does the
this is
town
a lot
board
of
have to do to
people
get this?
Done it yet.
Is it an automatic going forward, getting the plan, or is it something that the board has to do at this time?
Well, we have to help them pick the committee.
No,
and
I
then
know.
The chief's
Okay.
gonna
Yeah,
drive
just
it.
authorize, not even authorize, just ask him to
Okay.
move forward to launch on this.
Also, chief, I don't know if this will be helpful at all, but we have our own little hazard mitigation committee at the yacht club, given the increased flooding down on
Mhm.
Cheekwood Avenue. I don't know, you might wanna, I can put you in touch, you can have a conversation with them, see what they're doing, and
Yeah, that would be great. Again, those will be stakeholders, and we will absolutely reach out to the stakeholders. And, other ones would be the fire department, EMS, anybody that, in the town that would be involved in recognizing hazards and making us aware of when notifying us of them.
okay, just let me know.
Any questions from the public on this, on the Zoom audience? If you could drop the share, Kevin. I can see everybody on screen. Okay, thank you. The next topic is municipal drinking water, municipal wastewater. Facility needs assessment will be a second, we'll touch on it slightly today, but it won't be the focus for today. And Joe has a presentation on this,
You want me to stand or sit?
whatever you are comfortable with. I want to seat at the table. We can-
Yeah, I'll sit at the table.
I mean, or that table or this table?
Oh, I can see the screen better from here, so I'll sit and then I can scale up a bit. Yeah, Kevin, if you could share that presentation. Okay. So you can go to the first slide, next slide, Kevin. So today's presentation is really to serve as a briefing to the board as to where we are with our town building, wastewater and drinking water infrastructure systems, how we can move forward, and I'll fill you in on details along the way about the status of our systems, assessment of where our risks and problem areas are, And with regard to drinking water, an update on our mandate to take some out of compliance component up to compliance. So go ahead, Kevin. So just generally speaking, our current system assessment is that we have non-conforming wastewater systems at the town properties. And by town properties, I'm specifically referring to Justice Court, Police Department, Town Hall Complex, and the Legion facility across the street. We don't have any widespread functional issues. We're not dealing with active failure or performance problems, but we are non-conforming in the sense that these are antiquated in their technology. They don't meet current separation distances. They don't meet current setback requirements in some circumstances. Our density at several of these parcels is considered too high. That's we generate too much waste for the given parcel size. And so with regard to wastewater, we're not under a mandate to change these, but certainly these issues complicate the design process if we were to update them. And I know that it's been the intention of the town for several years now to advance this effort. So that's what we'll talk about today with regard to wastewater is where are the hangups and how we can overcome some of these. So go ahead, Kevin. So for a sense of scale, like I said, these are the 4 parcels that we're specifically talking about here. This is not all of the town's buildings, but we generally consider these one lump of town assets because they're all in close proximity. The other parcels that are of interest to the town but are not included in this presentation are the EMS building, which is down on Manwaring Road, and the senior center, which is down on, I think it's South Ferry Road there, but quite a ways separated from our complex up here. This chart here shows you what the design flow is for each of those facilities. Town Hall Complex is a little over 300 gallons a day. Police Department and Justice Court even a little bit lower than that. And the Legion, the most important takeaway here, generates a very, very high daily flow rate of sewage. These numbers are not metered numbers. These are code-generated numbers. This is the number that you're required to use by code when you're designing a new system. The Legion is very high because of the multifunction nature of the facility. I've described this as somewhat of a unicorn building. We have an auditorium, public gathering space there. We have a kitchen, restaurant, bar, and bowling alley, all in one building. And so when you add up all of the activities that are there, you get a very high daily design flow. And the specific reason that this complicates that property is that you have this disparity between your design constraints. You have on paper this facility that generates a lot of waste, and so you're obligated to install a system that can handle that. But in practice, you know, you're not seeing those kinds of numbers for the most part. Bowling alley's not open every day. The bar and the restaurant don't function every day. But that's not something we have a whole lot of control over. So we'll talk about in a few slides from now, you know, evaluating these different parcels for consideration based off of, you know, what I would say bang for your buck. Also look at viability, the number of variances or out of compliance issues, and we can use those to help guide how the town board wants to approach moving forward with this. So go ahead, Kevin. So here is a map of, here's an aerial view of town, center of town here. The large white building with the roof in the bottom center of the page, that's the school. There's Fisk Field across the street. But what you'll see in the purpose of this layout is to demonstrate just simply the well septic challenge that we have. There's an obligation that your well and your septic system, in our case, are 200 feet apart. And on these smaller parcels, it's nearly impossible to adequately site those two pieces of infrastructure outside of those separation distances. It also gets very challenging when you consider that you're not looking at this in a single parcel planning consideration. You have to look at what your neighbor's infrastructure is, and they are just as influential on your site layout as your own well location. So the blue and yellow circles there demonstrate the separation distance required from our current wells. And really the primary purpose, like I said here, is to demonstrate the space constraint that we have within these parcels. There are some other data points on here for neighboring wells. Those are just other points that we gathered as part of this exercise, so they're included here. But there are wells, for instance, here that are not town wells, they're on private adjacent properties, but they do influence the design process.
So is the blue ring 100 feet? or-
The blue ring, so there's two separation distances. There's one for your well to your treatment system. So if you had a septic system, that would be the distance from your well to the septic tank. That's a little bit less than the distance required than your well to your leach field. So there's a greater distance required for the second, and that's what the second ring is. So one is where you could put the treatment tank, and the other is where you'd have your ultimate discharge. So go ahead, Kevin. So looking at those parcels, what we can discuss a little bit more today is how to evaluate them. How I've looked at them previously is, how much does a given system cost? How difficult is it to execute? That's the viability. And then ultimately, what is the impact that said project, would have? Because we have some obscure buildings where the cost can be very high and the impact in practice could be quite low. So if you're talking about how to best spend limited resources, that's part of the conversation to be had. Go ahead, Kevin. So here's that, very qualitative type assessment. If we're looking at the Legion, number one, the siting challenges that you have are that you have very, very high flow that ultimately leads to cost increases to the project. The system has to be quite large, it takes up a lot of space. For scale, when we're talking about those daily sewage numbers, Legion's at about 2,500 gallons per day. The permissible amount of flow per acre in our area is 300 gallons per day. So that should give you a sense of how far from what's expected on the given parcel size we are. That property is a little bit over 1 acre, so it's scalable, but it's not materially more than 1 acre. So, that 300 is really more like 360 or something like that if we expand it based off of its square footage. So when I say very high flow, we are like not orders of one order of magnitude, but certainly multiples higher than what would normally be permitted for that site. So the viability, is I rank this as medium because we're not creating this. We're going to the health department seeking a best fit scenario that will ultimately improve the conditions at the site. But certainly, that's the type of application that looks at very closely by their department to make sure we couldn't do quite anything better than what we ultimately proposed. And that gets complex, and there may be a lot of concessions to be had in seeking that best fit solution, like well relocation, regrading of the property, changing the traffic flow patterns so that we can squeeze in, as much equipment as possible. The cost for the Legion would be quite high because of that flow and those constraints. And the impact I listed as medium simply because we know in practice that's not how the building is used. And because the building is not used consistently, you'd expect the performance to be a little bit more challenging from the system itself. Primary systems do best with consistent flow, both in quantity and quality. And the Legion would be kind of a choppy building for that. We'd have a deluge of flow generated when we had special events or when there were activities, but then it could be quiet for a couple of days. And so you'd expect to see some performance challenges either in the form of operating expenses or simply in the output, that you're not seeing the kind of treatment that you'd be expecting from the equipment. Looking at the town hall complex, we're dealing with some lighter density issues. Ultimately we are over density, but we're in the neighborhood. Separation distances are the name of the game for challenges at this property. But also, most importantly, the uncertainty of how this property may change is ultimately what discourages significant investment in a system at this property. So this is where the tie into the facilities needs and the facility assessment comes in. You know, your location of the system is very relevant on the given property, particularly one that's a commercial quality system like this one and the scale. It's going to take up a lot of space on the property. And it's not to say that you can't use that space for other things, but it's the kind of thing that you want to be certain that where you put it in the ground is not going to be something you want to change your mind about in the future. So we've talked a lot about how this particular parcel, you know, would strongly benefit from a long-term focus as to how we're going to use it. Are we going to add more office space? Are we going to somehow integrate this property with the now vacant property next door? And that's not to say that we can't come to a solution, but those variables would greatly impact both the price, the scale, and the complexity of doing the system here. So it's not to say that there's a specific problem with this site. It just influences, I think, my recommendation for the viability of pursuing this particular property until those other long-term, higher level planning decisions can be made. For instance, if there was a need to increase square footage here for the town boardroom specifically, you know, that type of flow is a matter of how many people can come here. So we have a huge impact on flow by adding just 50% more square footage to this room. If we added a second story, it would still be a significant addition of square footage, and that would change our flow rate. You know, it's very conceivable that we could go from 300 gallons per day to 500 gallons per day, and that would materially change the system requirements. So you certainly wouldn't want to invest in that size system if there's a possibility that you would, you know, maybe double the flow. That's very much unlike the Legion. You're looking at a number there that's very, very stable. It'd be nearly impossible to double that flow from 2,500 to 5,000. So you do have stability there in the size of that system, but it's a different subset of problems.
You were working on flow for this complex. Did you include just this parcel, or did you include the vacant parcel next to us?
The vacant parcel is excluded because it's a separate property. And so that's another great consideration for, you know, facility needs assessment. You can look at the advantages or disadvantages of, say, merging those lots. If you merge them, conceivably, you would add more flow. But in this case, you know, that property is a little bit less than an acre. This one is just about an acre. You get 300 gallons of flow per acre, even if you're a little bit less. So in the case of this vacant lot at 3/4 of an acre, you get an additional 300 gallons at that property as a standalone property. If you merged it and added just that 3/4 of an acre to this, you get less than 300 because you'd only be adding 3/4 of an acre. So, you know, that's a very primitive assessment as to how the town could use that property, but that's the kind of thing that you would engage in, you know, expertise from a needs assessment to say, how can we best use that property? Should we put a separate building up there? Should we treat that independently? Is there other perhaps advantages of merging the lots, you know, beyond what the septic or drinking water needs are? You know, that's not something that I could really answer. But those are the types of details that would play into how we approach this particular complex here. So number 3 here is highlighted, the police department. It's not because the police chief is sitting next to me, but I highlighted this as an example of a property that makes good sense to move forward. The police department has some separation distance challenges, but they're certainly surmountable. The police department is a building that is unlikely to change materially in the near future. We're not looking to conceivably double the size of it. It's a historic building, and so we don't believe we will abandon it. It has a long history of serving the town, and so the property size, the consistent daily usage, the occupancy being relatively stable and also relatively high by a town building, make it a very strong candidate for effective treatment. And the cost would be, you know, I rate here medium to low. You'll see when we get to the cost page, it's kind of ironic that we would say, these numbers are medium or low, but by way of septic systems, this is somewhat of the more approachable, more palatable price tag. And it's one that I think we could reasonably execute in-house, on a very small budget in short order. So similar conditions exist for the Justice Court. It's a standalone property. It's across the street from the police department, so we have nice separation. It's a standalone parcel that we don't expect will ever abandon, but the use is relatively low. The flow rates for the Justice Court are not that high. The property is a little bit smaller, and so it's still a good candidate. It's just not as strong a candidate, I don't believe, as the police department at this time. If there was to be an effort to do two at once, or which one I would suggest we do second, certainly it would be the Justice Court at this time. Go ahead, Kevin. So here's the price tags. These are estimates based off of some reference points, like the school we have as a reference for how much their system costs, the flow rates and the treatment types that they have. It also includes what I presume to be likely other changes that will be needed on the property. So, it's not just the cost of the system and the installation, it's the cost of doing things like repaving the parking lot on a site that we know it must be below a parking lot. The town hall complex is just one of them. It includes the presumed cost of relocating the wells on properties that I can look at and say, the health department will likely require you to relocate the well. That's all part of the best fit approach, is that we're going to squeeze these in. We're going to improve the overall performance and quality of what's there. But the expectation is that we will take every effort to minimize those separation distance issues, minimize the property setbacks. And so well relocation is a likely outcome for most of these properties, and that significantly drives up the cost of the project. So, looking at this from financial perspective, this is safely in the seven-figure range if we were to do all of these projects, where we have potentially access to a federal earmark for over $1 million.
I'll go through those numbers after you're done with yours.
Okay, and so, that's an avenue that we could explore if the all-at-once approach was something that we wanted to take into consideration. But certainly, doing the police department and justice court, singularly is something that we could achieve, with a much smaller effort. I'll talk about that more in a second, but we'll go to the next slide, please, Kevin. So this I just included here as a point of reference from previous study efforts. This was the ModFlow particle tracking model that was developed based off the groundwater elevations in the center of the island. Understand where our wastewater goes. We don't need to spend a lot of time on this because I think you've all seen this before. But generally this is the impact downstream that we would be looking to have. The police department and the justice court are kind of wavering on the upper portion of those screens. Those are the red lines that would be going out towards the heights, to the northwest, and then the other facilities, the Legion and the town hall complex. We're in the red lines moving to the southwest. Next slide. So pivoting to some of the drinking water considerations, just as a little bit of background, the town buildings are considered public water systems, even though they're served by individual wells. That's their category. We serve the public because we're a town building, but we also have employees. The state and county have very specific criteria as to what segregates an individual well from a public water system. We clearly fall into the public water category. As such, we have a separate set of regulations that we have to follow regarding testing protocols, regarding equipment standards, and they are the same for all of our facilities. The standards that we have to abide by are the same. So we have a town building here, this is considered a non-community public water system. It's the same as if a restaurant on the island was served by a well on site. They would be also considered a non-community public water system. So we share the same standards, but they're very different than what you would have at your home for a private well. Treatment requirements for non-community public water systems are nearly always required for full facility treatment. So at your home, an easy solution is an under the sink or what they call point of use treatment, where you're just filtering the water at that particular location. You can't usually do that for a non-community system. Whatever the issue is that you have to do for every bit of water that goes through the plumbing system, whether it goes into a toilet or whether it goes into a drinking water fountain. And there's almost with full certainty, no exemptions for things like, well, we have a water cooler or we provide bottled water. Those types of workarounds are not valid for not being able to meet the drinking water system standards, either because of water quality issues or because of system equipment. So you really don't have a lot of options other than to staying in compliance with your equipment and your testing protocols. So we are in a situation now where, because our wells and septic systems don't meet their required separation distance, and because we have some other, mineral-related pH type water quality problems, we are under a mandate to upgrade our drinking water systems presently at Town Hall and the police department. The Legion will be shortly following, but it's just not received a mandated requirement from the health department yet. So looking at what we need to do to get up to compliance is the installation of pH balancers. In the case of Town Hall, we have some other adjustments we need to do for iron removal. But the big ticket item is that we have to require disinfection treatment. So that's the installation of UV systems that disinfects the water. The reasoning from the regulators is that because we are not the right distance from our septic systems, even though we've never had a bacterial microbial contamination issue, the risk is high and the regulation requires that we install disinfection to be run all the time. So this is not an unknown thing. We've been confronted with this for over a year now. The relationship with the regulator is that we need to make progress towards resolving this. They are understanding that it takes time to evaluate your options, but that eventually will run out and we have to make forward progress. So forward progress is either simply installing these upgrades or seeking an alternative water supply. Those are the only two paths towards resolving this mandate. And an alternative water supply is a connected public water system. That could be from the well next door at the police department, could be from a well miles away, but it's an alternative supply, effectively removing your drinking water supply from the very parcel that doesn't meet the code requirements. The estimate to complete those upgrades is approximately $80,000. And this was something that was presented in the 2024 or 2025 budget request, but ultimately, I believe the town board decided to explore other options so that we would demonstrate to the regulators that we were making progress, but we don't currently have any other options on the table. So assuming that we don't take any significant steps towards seeking an alternative water supply, the expectation is that we will fund this next year or sooner if there was a funding source available. And that would be, like I said, on the scale of about $80,000.
For just this building?
For all of them.
Oh,
Yeah, for all of them.
When we spend that 80,000, does the 19,000 cost of operating go away?
No, arguably it will be higher because we will have more things to maintain. Right now, our operating costs, for instance, at town hall, we don't have any treatment system, so there's no iron removal system or pH system that requires maintenance. Our testing costs will stay fairly stable, but the maintenance costs, would likely increase. And also these prices or these expenses don't consider the town personnel that operate them. These are simply out-of-pocket costs. So we don't have a price tag on that, but it certainly is an increase in responsibilities for somebody to oversee, multiple units. It can be contracted out. It's a daily requirement that the equipment be checked. Many places like restaurants or hotels contract that out. So that's an option, but that would be a separate cost. Right now, we do all of that in-house, so there is no contracting out cost for operating the systems. We pay for the tests from the testing agency, we pay for the maintenance from the vendor, equipment supplier, but the operating and overseeing of that all happens in-house at no additional expense. Next slide, Kevin. So moving forward, right? That's what everybody wants to talk about. How to move forward. Town board needs to decide what is the approach. Are we going to do this one at a time, or are we going to try and hack off the easiest one, or are we going to make a push to do all of this at once? Largely, I think this is dependent on the availability of funding. Certainly, if the federal funding is available, that's an opportunity to do this all at once. In the all at once approach, this is not something that we could achieve in 6 months. The permitting process for this likely to take a year, maybe more. The coordination of shutting down each facility for the construction, that's fairly complex. Looking at the school as an example, that was a large project. They have the benefit of being closed for the summer, but when you do this type of project, the building largely has to be closed. People can't use the facility if there's no running water. So we would have to make accommodations like that. And we would certainly require a sizable amount of outside assistance to coordinate the all at once approach. But if the funding was available, that's something that could be worked into the cost, and that's something that would be executable in that model, certainly. The singular parcel approach, the one at a time, that's an opportunity for us to keep the costs lower. We can do more of those tasks in-house. Certainly the design work can be done by me. The permitting can be overseen by me. The Highway and Public Works Office can assist in the construction part of that. We can work in repairs to parking lots and things under our existing pavement budgets. I'll speak in advance for Ken as I'm committing his budgets now for other septic stuff, but conceivably there are small tasks that we could do to help contain the costs. If we were to do particularly the smaller projects, like the police department, but it would take a lot longer. So it's conceivable that for your own sense of timeline, if you said today I want to get the police department done, I think soup to nuts, with the resources, we could do it in a year. The biggest chunk of time for that is the regulatory hurdles. It's going to the health departments, going before the board of review. It's going through the bidding process. All of these projects are done with municipal procurement procedures. They're all done at prevailing wage or organized labor rates. So, the price tag, as you see, is significantly higher than your regular residential system. Although for some of these smaller systems, I think you'll see the prices kind of make sense. I mean, we're looking at $30,000 to $40,000 for a sizable residential system. For the police department and the justice court, we're probably about twice that price tag. That's I think a good reference point because of the increased cost of labor, the increased burden of procurement procedures for municipal contract. So that's sort of the connection I'm trying to make between the costs and what you might expect. If we're looking at the all at once approach, I think 2 to 3 years from the day you make that commitment is totally reasonable. Again, the longest stretch of time is in the planning phases of that. It's getting your permits approved. It's working with the regulators to overcome these variance issues, these compliance issues. And the construction, is a relatively small piece of that timeline. I'm suggesting here as a note that you consider centralizing something in terms of infrastructure. The biggest cost of, one of the biggest challenges of looking at this problem holistically is that we have a lot of things on a small property. So centralizing either your water delivery system or your waste system will help reduce the cost and complexity of the other item. If you remove your wastewater system from your property, your drinking water system becomes cheaper and easier to operate. And the inverse is true. If you remove the drinking water system from your property, the wastewater system becomes less complex and less expensive and easier to operate. So right now, we really don't have any alternative other than to go forward with keeping them combined. And there is certainly a pathway to do that. It just is more complicated to execute from a regulatory challenge. The mandate for our drinking water system is a great example of that. We don't have any bacteria issues. We've never had a positive bacteria sample at any of these properties, but the regulation now requires us to install a disinfection system and operate it simply because we're not compliant with the separation distance. So that's a huge burden for the town. It's a huge cost. But it's an example of how we get snagged in these regulatory challenges. Just like when we go before the Board of Review for any of these septic permits, we're wildly out of compliance with the separation distance. But that's just the nature of how this was. These are old properties that have been in use for, for decades, if not more, maybe even a century. And that's just the hand that we're dealt. We have these properties that are small, they're complex in their use, and it becomes really challenging to fit those square pegs into the round hole of the regulatory framework that we work in. Right, Kevin? Oh, that's it. Okay.
Joe, when you say combine or centralize, I mean, can the Justice Court and the Police Department share an IA system or? What are you looking at?
Yes, conceivable, yes, that's exactly right. And so when I say centralize something, it doesn't have to be on a broad scale, like we're going miles away. A shared water system could be contained to a few properties here. Those two are a little tricky because they're across the street from each other, but certainly sharing a wastewater system between the town hall and the police department, that's something that could be explored. They're adjacent properties. We would have to traverse the lot next door, and I think there's an easement between the two, but in concept, yes, that's exactly right. We don't need some broad, huge infrastructure connectivity that takes, water from one place or wastewater and ships it 2 miles down the road. That's not required. Simply connecting the properties that we're talking about is an option.
The easement, Joe, what is that, back to the cemetery?
Yeah,
Okay, right off of 114?
yeah.
Straight back, okay.
Was it public easement?
I think it's owned by the church. Yeah. And things like that, I don't think those are reasons to disqualify that as an option, but it's something that has to be.
Handled.
Yeah, exactly.
You just have to Something has to be
account for it,
negotiated
yeah.
and
To plan for it.
Any other questions from the board before I open it up to the public? Anyone in the public? We forgot to set up the podium.
Thanks, Dad.
It's gonna do it.
Yes.
You want to take away?
Come on up.
It's the public works.
Public
I
Works
just
at
wanted to
Work.
ask Joe a couple of questions.
Yes.
The $80,000 approach,
If you could direct it towards the board, just because the
mics are
speakers. Yeah, here.
Joe, the $80,000 approach, how long would that bridge your problem with the mandate coming down the pike?
That is the mandate. The
So
mandate.
80,000, that has to happen no matter what you do.
Unless we connect to an external water supply, like I said, alternative water supply.
Okay, but do you see the possibility without some miracle funding coming through of any chance that that alternative could happen before you're forced to spend the $80,000? Just trying to
Sure.
sequence it.
Yeah, the mandate allows, if we commit to doing that alternative water supply, the mandate will be postponed so that we can do it. The mandate is saying that you either have to come up into compliance or you have to commit to the other option. So if you commit and it still takes a year or two, they're okay with that. But if you're not going to commit, they're going to force you to do the upgrades.
So if you did the 80 grand, are you then good for 5 years, 10 years, ad infinitum?
So long as the regulations don't change or you don't have any other problem. You're just continuing down the path of being the independent water operator. So that gets you up to compliance now. Conceivably, that would last until you had another issue, if you had another issue. And by other issue, I just simply mean if you have another type of contaminant, you have to then upgrade to deal with that. If there's no other problems, then you continue indefinitely.
Well, I just think that was a super high quality presentation. And my concern for the town is the endangered species is Ukraine, federal employees, and any kind of federal money at this point for anybody. I don't think you can rely. I mean, they're revoking leases that IRS offices are operating in now. They're revoking leases because 500 employees have nowhere to work now. So I don't think until maybe a year or so passes and these lawsuits start to calm things down, that it's a viable alternative to look for federal money, because I don't think it's a reliable option for you. So if it's not a reliable option, and that's the biggest pot of money, I think, right? Then maybe the 80 grand thing could work. And I don't know, guys, I don't know if any of this is tax deductible for people, but maybe yacht club, Bay Beach, me, others could do something for the 80 grand and get it going. Just throwing that out there. I mean, I'd step up. So, and it just, you got so much on your plate, it'd be great to take this off your plate. And we can't count on the feds. So maybe, are there other public, I'm not a lawyer.
I was gonna get into a little bit of some public money that we possibly have.
Okay,
But I wanted to see if there were any
Thanks,
questions on
thank you.
Joe's piece, but yeah, I was gonna talk about federal funding. Anyone on Zoom who has any questions? Just before I get into the funding part of this, what I would like to see happen is we all digest this presentation, is that in the next week or two, we bring in looking at our needs assessment, because before we've got all these moving pieces, and one of the things I'd like to sit down with Joe is saying, if we let's go with AI and fixing with the $80,000 fix, like what does this look like? What's the cost? What's the timeline for this? If we look at a public water source, do we look at something in Sachem's Woods? And do we finance it ourselves to bring water? And that changes the game on the drinking water issue, and also may help us clear up some of the variances that we'll need to get in order to do the IA systems. So, and then also, we've got a couple of consulting engineering firms who we have to just circle back to them to now bring them to do presentations to the town board to say, do we want to go forward with facilities master plan, starting with the needs assessment? How does that, if we change what we're going to do in this building, then that changes some of the dynamics of what we're trying to implement. So we have a few more steps to go that I would like to really do, like track 1, track 2, track 3, and just understand costs and timelines on that.
I think that's a good plan. I think a needs assessment is important in order to avoid, I don't want to be too short-sighted in how we approach this, because a lot of the buildings need work. And I think it's important to evaluate and see what actually has to happen in the long term to make sure that we're planning accordingly for what we need. You know, just for example, we're talking about looking at doing an IA system for the police department, but we also already have plans to do ADA compliance, which is another $1 million probably project. So how does the ADA compliance tie into the septic upgrade? Is that going to require well moving? There's like a whole bunch of things that, you know, they're all going to play into each other. So I think we need to put everything on the table and look at it in one comprehensive picture to see how everything's going to impact each other. I wouldn't want to go and do something just to realize that now we've created even more of a complication in what's already a complicated mess.
Other thoughts?
Joe, you had said that you could delay the regulatory aspects of it by committing to something. Does a needs assessment and understanding the options of what we have here, does that constitute a feasible delay?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that, but we can ask. And certainly we're asking, we know who we're asking, you know, it's the health department that has to make that decision. So if that's the direction the town board wants to go, I think we can lobby for that to be our commitment. But my concern, at least at face value, is that that's not really a commitment to a particular solution, and that's their objective. Is they're trying to get their goal is to get us to be compliant. So my guess is that if we presented a study, you know, that perhaps may not be looked upon as favorably, but I don't know. It's very possible that it could be. Yeah.
Well, the option is to do nothing, which is what we've done, okay? Or do we really start to get serious about addressing, I mean, the whole issue of, this started many years ago with the municipal buildings, okay? And we're asking our residents, okay, to do the right thing by putting in IA systems, taking care of their waste. And I feel to myself that the town, to go into, you know, we've heard this over and over again about hiring consultants or doing needs assessment. I think it's important, okay? But I think, you know, we can find all the reasons and the things not to move forward. I think it's important to move forward and have some direction here, okay? And I think, you know, when this first came about, that's when the school was doing its investigation of doing IA systems, okay? And they did their thing, okay? I don't know how complicated this is to sit down and get a piece of white chalkboard and say, how do you want this to look like? And you get some kind of an idea and you move forward with it. I'm just saying to you that it just feels like we're delaying something. And I think we really do have a responsibility. We're in the center, that's where our employees are. We have cesspools that are here that I guess you're saying our cesspools are not failing at this time. We just pump them. Is that what we do?
They're functional. They
Yeah,
just
but we
don't
just-
provide any treatment, right?
Yeah, we just pump them. I mean, is that a solution?
Well, that's why I'm suggesting we look and pick a track, like we look at what our tracks are. Or are you suggesting we don't even, we just?
I'm just suggesting that we spent there's a lot of time has gone by, okay? And we're still with this, what do we need? What does the complex look like? How complicated is this, okay? I don't know what the complication is, okay, in terms of getting a drawing board. I've asked Joe for you to do a map to show all the buildings, lay them out, and what do you perceive that your needs are? Okay, how complicated is this? I guess what I'm just saying to you, I think and we've never really applied for a variance. We've never gone, and quite honestly, my little bit of dealings that I've had with Suffolk County is they have a planning board, and their planning board is meant for towns like ours, who do not have a planning board.
No, it's not.
No, I'm sorry, I'm not talking about the commission, I'm talking about the planning board, the planning department, okay? The planning board, okay, is something entirely different, but I am told that they're here for small municipalities like ourselves to guide us, because we don't have a planning department. And I don't know, I think it would be worthwhile to come to them and get some advice, but at least move this on. And let's, if it's public water you want, it's public water. If you can do it with the IA systems, it's IAs, but just, I feel we're like just hanging in there, and we're just, we're finding reasons not to do it. I mean, when we went to the school and we begged them to hold back, because we're trying to get a centralized wastewater treatment system in, and we begged them, well, it's working. Well, that was over a year ago, or almost 2 years, okay? They've taken care of their thing. Don't we have a little embarrassment here that we're not taking care of our own waste? And yet we're encouraging, and we're saying we're encouraging the public to come forward and, well, fill out an application, get your IA system in, and we're still in the study format. We're in the, let's research it, let's find our needs assessment and everything else. I'm just saying to you that I think we need a firecracker under us to move the thing forward. That's what I'm just trying to say. I understand the needs assessment, and what happens, it's like things go from 1 week, and before you know it, we're into August, and then we're into next year, and the things just go on and on and on, okay? I'm just suggesting, okay, I'd be glad to work with you, Joe. Okay, I'd be glad to work with anybody on the board, and let's do a sketch of what we think. What is our vision? We're not building a skyscraper here. If we do add some things, it'll be additional buildings, okay? But I think I just would like to see some more movement, and I would really like to work with you, Joe, because you've spent all the time with Lombardo. We spent all this money in the center over wastewater. Isn't it time?
So I really kind of don't appreciate you saying that we have done nothing, because we actually have done a lot of work on this, and we keep coming with options that keep getting shot down. So for example, wastewater treatment plant, yes, of course, that got shot down. However, we then came up with, okay, one of our complications is that we have wastewater and well water all in the same lots, too close together. And so we're gonna need variances for everything for multiple properties, no matter what we try to do. So a simple solution to try to, or not maybe simple, but a solution to try to reduce the number of variances that we require and to make it more feasible to do wastewater treatment on these locations would be to move water treatment somewhere else, like Stageums. We have that possibility.
Not
That was brought up.
Water supply.
Water supply. Did I say wastewater? I apologize.
Said treatment.
Oh, well, it would be water, but with some kind of water treatment to meet county requirements for potability. So that option was Sachem's Woods. And we brought that up in the budget season, and that's the reason why we didn't put this $80,000 in the budget, because we said we would explore the possibility of putting that well in at Sachem's to see if it's even a viable option. Because once we know that.
Which side of Sachem's? Originally, we were going to draw a line from where the West Neck Water, and there was going to be a test well on the west side of Sachem Woods, and that was never done, correct?
No.
No, we haven't.
And let me finish. So, and I asked Joe about that, because I know you had talked about it, and said, well, the board never said to move forward with it. So we never tested there. Now we're on the opposite side of Sachem Woods. Meg, I hear you, okay? I absolutely hear you, okay? And the issue that I think maybe where the biggest disagreement is, okay, providing good water, okay, from Sachem Woods is not going to resolve the aquifer.
But it will resolve the regulatory hurdles.
I understand that,
Solving the septic.
and I think that may be short-sighted.
I don't think it is.
I know, that's where we're differing.
Yes, we're going to differ on a lot of things, I feel, because it's poor planning. You keep saying we need a planner, fine, we need a planner, get a planner, because what you're talking about is poor planning, not looking at the long-term future of all these buildings. So you put an $80,000 water treatment system in for every single one of these buildings. Now we end up with high nitrates. You have to amend that system to now include reverse osmosis, something to handle the nitrates. Oh, now we got PFAS. Now you have to put another system for that. So the maintenance costs, the operational costs, the testing costs, it's all going to continue to add up. And so it's one
I think we can continue your way and just not do anything and just let the thing just drag on and drag
think
on.
that's
That's not what I'm
very-
suggesting.
Very inappropriate.
I'm not suggesting that we not do anything. I'm suggesting we look at tracks. I have a feeling, I want to present, these are all the possible tracks, and we make a decision. Do I think we know where that decision's going to fall? I think it's going to fall on we only deal with IA systems. But I just want to make sure that we are clear and understand what options we are turning away from when we make that decision.
So,
I don't- it's-
so from the Lombardo days, from when Lombardo came here, and he sat here and we did all this study and everything else, we're still into the, we spent money, we did all these things, and we're still there. We need to do more studies or whatever it is, okay?
What you're not understanding, I don't think, I still don't think you get the whole picture.
I'm sure I
The
don't.
Lombardo study gave us the solution that would have moved the wastewater off of this site. Obviously, people didn't like that. But what it did do was allow for future use of this property in some fashion, whether we had to add office space or whatever we have to do. It allowed for that in the design because it eliminated a lot of the setbacks, the regulatory conflicts, right? So it gave the community flexibility with the buildings. And so that's kind of a key aspect of it. One way or the other, something's going to have to give, whether it's we think differently about wastewater or we think differently about our potable water. Trying to keep it as it currently is going to be very, very difficult. And in many cases, the health department may say no, or they may request something that's so ridiculously complex that it's cost prohibitive.
Meg,
So
we're keeping it as is right now. Like, I agree with you, we're keeping it as is, okay? All I'm saying to you, I don't know, Joe, you have never applied for a variance, okay, as you have said to me, and I'm just,
Because the
listen,
board has never authorized him on a direction
Correct.
to go.
Correct. We applied for a variance at the Legion when we needed to move the well with the sanitary system in the well at the Legion.
Yes, this was before my time, but the Legion project was attempted by the previous town engineer, John Cronin. And that project ultimately failed because we could not secure the final permits for well relocation. At the time, the septic was approved, but then the well failed. It's an unbelievable coincidence, and they could not come to a resolution as to how to reapprove the well that required relocation. At that point, they looked to merge the treatments of the wastewater between the Legion and the school. And that's ultimately how the relationship developed between the town and the school, because those flow rates at the Legion were so high, the Legion didn't have the space. The well requirements were totally in conflict with doing all of those on site with the Legion. And so the town and the school embarked on a partnership to merge the Legion's waste with the school's project. How that developed after that and where we got segregated, I don't quite know. It was before my time, but ultimately the town went back to the school sometime later, who had not yet installed their system, but had been in the planning phases of their own since then. And the town re-engaged to study the centralized option together. That ultimately fell apart, as everybody knows. But that's a little bit of the history behind. So I have not applied for a variance, and I want to make it clear, it's not that I believe we won't get the variances. It's not like I believe we're going to be rejected. It's just that requiring the variance before the Board of Review often becomes a bit of negotiation between the health department trying to achieve their objectives and being sure that we have done everything possible to minimize the conflicts, the impacts. So they may look at other things that drive cost or complication of the project, like well relocation or treatment. Sometimes they ask for water samples and they base their decision on how your water quality is. So I want to make it clear, I don't believe we're going to get rejected from the health department. That is not the case. They very much want to work with the project that is improving the situation. And that's, to be clear, exclusively what we're doing. We're only making the situation better, as has been discussed many times. So the variance process is not one where I believe we're going to be sent home. It's one that will just be a longer process. And potentially introducing other scope items that we either didn't plan or that we feel are, unreasonable, and it may change our approach in the project as to what we want to spend money on. And some of these parcels, as I said, are much less susceptible to those types of problems than others. But some parcels are complex.
Joe, what's the timetable on a needs assessment that I guess we were referring to? How long does it take to do that?
So that's largely dependent on how the town board wants to scope the project. If I was looking to do this on an expedited basis, the complicated piece is this one right here. It's the town hall, which is why I keep sort of going back to this idea that if we want to get something done, we have some parcels that are fairly disconnected. We could scope a needs assessment that looks at all of the town assets. And that would be reasonable, but it would be more expensive, it'd be more time consuming. We could narrow the scope to look at our most complicated buildings and facilities like town hall, the vacant property next door, and we could get moving on those other properties. The buildings that we haven't discussed, that are also up for consideration are the senior center, the EMS building. We could take an approach where we tackle those because we know they're out sort of on their own, can invest money in taking those projects off the table, getting those done, while we focus on, the needs assessment for our core properties here. So there's a lot of approaches, but we need to make a decision on how to move forward.
During the summer, we had a lot of events under the tent over water, okay? And at that time, okay, and obviously it's still there, the budget contained funding for some of this needs assessment,
It does.
okay? We never spent any of that money, correct?
No,
So I'm talking about, this is now, we're in March, we talked in the summer, that was 4, it's 7 months later, and we're still talking about needs assessment. Okay, so what I'm saying is, what can we do? How can we get together to move this process forward so we come to a conclusion?
Tell me how you guys want to execute this, and I will get it done.
Is the funding still there?
Yes.
Is it still in the budget?
Yes.
Okay. I would like to start with some schematicals, okay, and at least move it forward in some direction, bring it to the board, let's deal with this particular building, or any building you want to deal with, okay, but let's get the overall complex together, okay, not this complex, but all of it, all the buildings. Let's identify it, let's take a look at what you might think this would be, a 2-story building, some modifications, maybe the building department might want to expand or something, a couple of more rooms, okay? And just have some framework of what you might consider. Let's hold hands and you and I walk down to the planning, Suffolk County with their people. Let's get some help with this thing, whether it means spending some of this funding that you've put aside for it. But I think that's what we need to do. We need to move this forward. That's what I'd like to have.
But wouldn't a smaller scope slightly make more sense and move it faster? I mean, if we work on this building.
I agree with that, but that's not what, I want to deal with what Meg mentioned, that she wants a long-term plan, not be short-sighted. So thinking long would be to do something on an overall basis, okay? I mean, that would be the way to do it, but I think she's right. I think that we do need to look what it might look like, but I think some time has passed here, and I'm willing to raise my hand and work with you every day to do this. Okay? Whatever you need, that's all I'm saying to you. I just would like to move it forward, that's all. So are we okay with spending some money out of the budget that we've allocated to do what this?
For the facilities, for
Okay.
the needs assessment,
Yeah.
yeah, it's there, we just have to scope it, and we have to select a firm.
I think it's more than a firm,
Yeah,
don't we, before we hire a firm, don't we have to have some visual idea of what we think?
Do it.
No,
No? Okay.
I think that's what Amber suggested, is that you guys lay everything out on the table and then move the Joe.
Yeah, and we have some information from 2 engineering consulting firms, so I will bring those in the next iteration of this conversation.
we've already met with 2 firms. They've walked all of our properties, so they're familiar with what we're looking to do. So they are also, they've done this before for other municipalities, so they know what kinds of questions to ask, what kinds of, I mean, part of it would be interviewing the different department heads and saying, what are you seeing as a need for your staffing in the future? Or what space do you require that you don't currently have? Like, we know as a town board, we don't have any office space. This room is our office. So is that something that we think is necessary? That's something that we have to plan in. So, you know, this company, whoever we work with, would put all that together for us and help us do that whole process to make sure we're doing it correctly and we're not just winging it, like, what do we think we need, but actually do it correctly so that we have a tool that we can use moving forward.
When were these firms interviewed? Was this 2022?
One was in 2024 and the other one was in 2023.
It was
Yeah.
last year?
Yeah,
What was last
I don't
year?
remember it. I don't remember it.
Who was, I
Oh,
I wasn't there.
oh, yeah, no, I called them and had them come in. They're,
one was Cameron Engineering
right.
and
that's
the other
person,
one was
McLean.
McLean.
Yeah.
was it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, but I couldn't have the whole board walk with us because then that would create a quorum. And like, this was just to get them to come in and then give us something that the board could then look at and come in and have them make a presentation. So the most important person to walk around with them was Joe and
Mhm.
Ken and Reed to talk about, you know, what buildings look like and
Yeah.
where systems were located and things like that.
That way they could give us an
Mhm.
estimate on what it would be.
Well, I'm not sure what stalled it, but what, so not much is needed to get moving here.
Correct, yeah, and that was my plan, was to keep things moving along, but we also had an election in there, getting the board up to, you know, 5-board complement, just to keep things moving. The other piece that we haven't been talking about is the school was able to go forward with their IA system because they had money. We have only recently have money, maybe, and that's, I was going to just go through that money piece.
Yeah, since it's a federal grant, I mean, the longer we wait, the less chance that money will still be there.
I'm not sure, I mean, I just don't know, but at least let me,
Okay, let you say your piece.
yeah, I was gonna say, let me just share this. So we have received a grant. It's it's part of the community grants program. If it's, the House and the Senate have to agree. So the Senate is the congressionally directed spending program. The House is community project funding. So Schumer, Gillibrand, and Lolota got together. The title of the grant is the Shelter Island Center Municipal Wastewater Treatment System. This was a grant that Jerry worked on and got for us when he was still here. He worked with Lolota, who then in turn worked with the other two. Originally, this was going to be for the municipal wastewater treatment system that was going to be down on Manwaring Road. Unfortunately, because it has been termed Shelter Island Center Municipal Wastewater, and we got awarded this last year, my biggest concern immediately was trying to get hold of somebody in the senator's office or the congressman's office to find out, have we just shot ourselves in the foot? Because what we put in for was the town of Shelter Island will construct a municipal wastewater treatment system that will serve 8 municipal facilities located in the area of the town referred to as the Island Center, for the purpose of reducing groundwater nitrate levels in the drinking water supply and surrounding surface waters of the Peconic Estuary. Since we are pivoting to individual IA systems, or maybe a few IA systems, I think we can continue moving forward on it. That's what I've been told by Schumer's office.
Okay.
And actually, how do I get this to advance?
Click the next slide.
This is 1.25 million?
Yeah, so what we have is, let's, some reason, yeah, it's not the right. So the project, as I stated, is the town of Shelter Island for wastewater treatment system. That's how it's listed in the document. The award is 1.25 million. It's from the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, and we will be working through the Environmental Protection Agency. Last fall, our grants writer was starting to set up a meeting with the EPA because we've been awarded this money. So the senators and the congressmen all like, hey, here's your money, but there's steps that have to be taken. So we have to write the grant contract with them. So she started to reach out. Elections happened. At one point at the beginning of this year, this money was taken off the table, but that taking has been paused by the judicial system. So we have to see how that plays out. So right now, I'm going to talk to Jenny. I spoke to her this morning. I forgot to ask her this question. Need to find out whether or not they will talk to us, or if the people that we were going to talk to are even still there. But if this can move forward, we have money available to fund this, because otherwise we're going to either have to bond or raise taxes. So why haven't we moved forward? Like, we need the federal government to work with us to get this money released. The cost share on this is 80% on federal and then 20% town or other. The other can be state money, it can be county money, it can be WQI money, it can be town bonded money, town tax money, however.
That money is about,
Yeah, so,
that's not the hard part.
so that's, but that's, a consideration in there. So while Joe had said if we did all of the systems, it was $1,059,000 basically. We would need to come up with $200,000 locally, and we can use some in-kind services such as personnel costs. So Joe's time spent on this, we could accounts for a little bit of it. The one thing is when reading through this document, we can modify the type, the purpose, or the recipient with permission. So if we had decided that we want to go down the track where we deal with drinking water first, we could do a project modification to this and use it for drinking water instead of wastewater. The grant is for us, but we could also bring in the library, the school, and the fire district. Obviously, if we did water, then it would be our project, and the school could be involved, the library could be involved, fire district could be involved. For the IA system, since the school's already done, they'd be out of it. But the library is going to be putting in their IA system. If we're leaving money on the table, we could possibly do a modification where we could help fund some of that part of their project. Then they wouldn't have to draw down as much on their bond from DASNY, and we could save the taxpayers money that way. So if we're leaving money on the table, that is a road that I would like to go down and investigate. The next steps that we need to is hope that this program is going to continue to go forward. So we need to have a preliminary contract meeting with the EPA. We need to determine specifically how we want to use the funds. Do we want to use it for wastewater? Do we want to use it for water? We will need to prepare a grant budget. So we do need to understand specifically what we're going to do. And so Joe would have to sharpen his pencil, or whoever engineering consulting we bring in would have to come up with hard numbers for us to work on. And we'd also have to determine before we move forward is where exactly we're going to get the local funding sources. We did, when we were looking at the municipal wastewater, we did have a grant application into the county that's for $250,000. We have to turn that money down because that specifically was for that project. So we can't pivot it to an IA system. So unfortunately, we decline on that, and then maybe we can reapply at the county level. Sometimes when you turn down a grant, they're less likely to give you the next one, because if you have a history that starts to turn down grants, why are they wasting their time? And we could also look to WQI. So that's where we stand with that. We have to just sort of see where the federal government falls out on this. And otherwise, we're going to have to come up with a different way to pay for all of this.
How does that happen?
How does what?
See where the federal government is.
Time.
We have to see how these things play out, because one day it was on the list, because I went and looked on the federal website to see if it was one of the programs that was cut, and it was. And then the next couple of days later, information came out that said that those programs that were cut were put on hold, that they were not automatically cut. So we just have to stay in touch with.
And who's doing the reach out, the grant writer?
So Jen is the one that's communicating to find out the status of this program.
Yeah, I mean, some of it I was able to find online, like the initial, when the funding was cut, and I was like searching diligently, trying to find out like, okay, there's cuts all over the place. And so I was able to find the right website where it was listed. It wasn't listed by name, but it was listed under the programs, what was
Worst case
the Clean
scenario,
Water State Revolving Fund programs.
the worst case scenario is bonding it and borrowing the 1.1 million.
Yeah, or if it qualifies for WQI.
Well, and it's kind of in the name, water quality improvement.
But anyway, so that's the funding piece of this. So hopefully that funding remains. Once we pick a direction and start to come up with a plan of how we want to deal with this, we can then apply to state and county sources. You know, there is state WQI money out there, and then the county just implemented this, what was it? 0.25%? 0.5%? 8%. 8% sales tax increase. So
So do we have
There will be.
sorry.
there will be more funding sources out there on county level.
So of these two companies that came to do the walkthrough for facilities needs project, did we have a preference?
Not necessarily.
We have to just compare the two.
Yeah, we don't have a formal proposal from the one. They had wanted some additional information that I don't think was ever provided to them back in 2023. And then the one had provided a quote that was, didn't make sense. And so when I went back to talk to them, it was like, oh, we didn't understand the scope. And that's when they came out and did a walk around so that they could do a better proposal. So,
Did they resubmit a proposal?
yes, yes, they
Oh,
did.
okay.
And it was more expensive, which was more in line
Which
with
made more
what the
sense.
expectation of this kind of consulting.
Didn't make sense because it was too cheap.
The $17,000 one didn't, yeah.
How did the numbers, how did they match up with what was appropriated?
We have enough. We have enough money. Yeah, there's 65,000 in the budget.
Right now, but this was 2023?
No, this was 2024, it was last fall.
Is there a possibility of looking at that file that has all of that documentation in it?
Yeah, I'll pull it out.
Because that would be helpful to see, review it, okay?
So right now, we're gonna have the grant writer look into the
federal funds.
availability.
Yeah, and trying to see if we can still move forward with the grant contract even while we don't know whether.
Well, that's one track. The other track is for us to figure out what we need.
Yes.
And
Right,
we're
exactly.
gonna go ahead with
Yes,
that.
yes, because we have to go ahead, because we do need to make a decision. We need to figure out what direction we want to go. We have a full complement of a board here. We can make a decision.
Okay.
You know, we're not going to run into the 2-2, vote that we aren't going to investigate Stations Woods. We'll either vote that we are going to investigate it or we're not going to.
I'm happy to work with Joe and Gordon on this. I mean, that's fine. Yeah, and we can at least take one more step forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we need to move forward. And if the funding is paused or can't come up with it initially, at least being that much closer,
We got a plan,
we can look for the funding.
got a plan.
Because doing the needs assessment is important because it could affect the size of the buildings, and the size of the buildings impacts the size of the sanitary system necessary. So just using the police department as an example, we're doing ADA, we're proposing ADA modifications. That's going to increase some of the square footage, probably not significantly enough to impact the size of the sanitary system, but it's something that you still need to take into account. Also,
Same with Justice Court.
right, same with Justice Court. So, it's making sure that you're looking at the entire picture and not just this narrow scope that you want to focus on. Like, I want to focus on sanitary, sure, but how's that going to impact your parking? How's that going to impact the internal plumbing of the building? How does it impact where you're gonna move your well? If you're gonna move your well over there because you have to move your sanitary system, how does that movement of the well impact Justice Court across the street? So you have to look at the whole picture. That's just, and for long-term planning, it's
So we're
just
all
makes
okay with
sense.
sitting down, Gordon and I sitting down with Joe and trying to figure out a next step?
Yes,
Yeah,
Okay.
and I will also, you know,
I mean, I think.
give
we
Joe,
need the steps
sit down
to-
and go in more detail about my idea of, you know, the different tracks and
Sure.
what I would see, and then you
Absolutely.
guys can.
All input is
can
good
run-
input.
Yeah.
And let's do it. Monday? Well, no reason to
Well,
wait.
Joe has plenty of room upstairs. I could put my office up next to you.
Bring a desk up. Yeah.
Yeah,
We'll talk more on this, okay? Good.
yeah, no, yeah, and also
Joe,
like,
good job with putting this together, okay? Let's move it. Let's
have
do
any
it.
other questions from the public? Okay, to be continued.
No tomatoes.
Thanks, Joe.
All right,
Thanks, Joe.
now on to DOCCO. All right, so we had a public hearing last week, and we had some comments, additional comments from the public.
Yeah. So, there you go. Did anything get in the SharePoint on this?
It's still on the town website.
Okay.
Yeah, if you go to,
Discussions.
to the
The far
upcoming
right,
hearing, yeah,
upcoming
upcoming hearings,
hearings.
pending ones. It's the
Okay.
12. Go higher up, it's right there, this one, dot code 12, 2/11/2025. All right. All right, who wants to start?
I'll start. Okay, I've had a lot of conversation over the stock code, even though I sort of got into it a little late. The question that I have, okay, is, it seemed to have come up, and I just want clarification. I was under the understanding that there has not been an official vote from the committee on this proposal that's before the board. Is that correct?
On this particular draft?
This draft?
And, oh, not, I don't know about this particular draft.
Say is, the committee sits down, submits something, they vote to submit it to the town board for their review and approval.
Mhm.
That's the reason.
So the first draft,
The first
the
draft,
first draft with the first public hearing
okay.
was voted on by the committee
And then it was approved by that committee,
and given to us.
given to us, and then we massaged it or made some changes to it, okay? I'm gonna ask this question again. Does it need to go back to them for the committee to have their voice spoken?
No,
I don't think so.
no.
Okay,
Because the members who have wanted to give input have given input. And also, once it got turned over to us, we own it.
Yeah.
We got to make it
All
happen.
those members of the
but the
committee.
initial part that was put together, that committee voted on it, and do you recall what the vote was? Was it an unanimous vote?
Those two liaisons, I can't remember.
It was
but-
maintained, actually, it was maintained that there was not a final vote. Some members said that there was not a final vote given on the plan in its entirety, the revision. They broke it down into pieces and they voted on the individual segments of the plan and the development of the revision. And that was voted on. Some of them were 7-0, some of them are 4-3.
The different segments, but when the plan was presented to the board, was there an official, they didn't have an official, I'm just trying to clarify because I thought it was had been voted on and we moved forward. You're saying that they did votes on specific sections of it.
They went through, yes, and they voted
The whole
on specific
code has
sections.
gone through.
Right.
Different sections were voted on.
Right.
All sections were passed. None
All
were
sections
turned
were passed.
down.
Okay,
And then it comes to us.
right, okay.
And it's just a recommendation to us And then we're going through the public hearing process and taking public input.
So the statement that has been said to me multiple times that committee did not vote on it is not correct. They did in fact vote on it before they presented it to the board. Is that, am I reading that correct?
At least it's not relevant.
Huh?
Or at least it's not relevant, because it was voted on and passed to us.
Okay.
So, it sounds like someone who wasn't happy with it and what we're
Well,
doing.
it's either voted on or it's not voted on, but you're
It was
saying,
voted on in segments, like you said, but in its entity entire, it wasn't voted on saying, hey, is this ready? Let's go. I think they voted on all the,
But at this point, we own it.
Yeah,
And we've had 3 public hearings on it. So it has changed over the time because of that. And so we need to keep, because we are the ones who had the public hearings. We need to keep it.
once it's sent to the board, it's the board's.
I mean, if we want, we can do our discussion today, and any final changes or iterations, we can send back to the committee for written notes back to us and then move forward with the hearing. But I don't know if they have any other meetings coming up, but it's not really, it's not protocol to send it back to the committee while we're in the middle of doing the revisions. I mean, we can ask them for input, which we've.
So this is a very hard thing. It's a very hard thing we're dealing with, okay? I mean, it's funny, I had somebody today, was talking about the tax bills, and a gentleman lived on the water, and he said to me, geez, did the code pass? And I said, I wanted to know, and I said, why? He says, well, because I got my tax bill, and it seems like the value of my property is less, okay? And he says, I'm thinking it was because that you passed the dock code, so my property is worth less, okay? I mean, I'm just showing you how things are, okay?
well, how people may be perceiving.
I'll take it, okay?
Absolutely don't think that's.
I mean, quite honestly, the only issue that I have, listen, there's no good or bad thing. The thing that I'm more concerned about is the dynamics of the committee. That doesn't change. It seems like there's a little friction there, and I don't know how to resolve the friction. It seems to me that has to be resolved, because even if you pass it or you don't pass it, what are you doing with the committee? What do we do with the committee that's at loggerheads?
Well,
We need to get beyond this so that we pass this and they have this new legislation to deal with, and then they continue on the work that they normally do, which is a lot less contentious than this process has been.
That said,
I mean, I have some notes from the public hearing.
Mhm.
sure.
I mean, I guess first big note, do I rip off the Band-Aid first?
Go for it.
Is that I think
I
that the GPS coordinates need to come out of the legislative intent. I think it actually weakens the code. It creates more room for it to be contested. We've created in the definitions protected areas, but we haven't actually developed or adopted a list of protected areas or developed a criteria by which we're going to identify protected areas. And so if we pass the legislation with this in it, I think that I personally, if I were going to sue us on this, I would attack the protected areas designation, because we can't demonstrate how or why we developed this. And if someone says, hey, show me your list of protected areas, we haven't actually passed one yet. We haven't established a list. So I think it's preemptive to put the protected areas in this code when we haven't actually developed or established that list.
The last version of this legislation,
Didn't have protected areas in it.
no, it just says there are areas of concern. It's part of the
Concern, right.
legislative intent. And maybe Stephen can chime in here. but we're not calling them protected areas. We're just saying, hey, we're doing this legislation for all these reasons, and we actually have some concern about these areas. It's not giving them any kind of status as a protected area that can be attacked in the litigation.
Well, then we need to take out the definition of protected area.
I don't think there is a protective area.
There is on page three.
Yeah, there is a definition of protected areas. Waterfront properties at risk of exposure to inordinate wave action driven by wind and or boat traffic, areas where the depth of water is insufficient to accommodate regulated activities, areas proximate to sensitive, pristine, preserved or public beaches, areas where regulated activities would pose risks to human or aquatic life, and areas designated by resolution of the town board from time to time.
What's wrong with that?
So you want to eliminate that?
Yeah, and this is
Well,
why.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I have.
I'm
thoughts on
not,
it
I'm
too.
not just, ixnaying it, but because what you have here in this definitions is actually what we're using as the review criteria for the permit application. So I don't think the definition is necessary because when the committee reviews an application, they have to take all of those factors into account. But I think that having this definition with the caveat that we're going to create a list that's going to be updated time to time by resolution of the board creates a problem. I think the code is actually stronger without it.
And that's, those concerns or criteria are on page 12.
Right. So page 12 says that
No, that's okay. Thank you.
in imposing restrictions or denying a permit, the town shall consider public and private interests balanced with site characteristics in the following criteria. And the criteria that they have to look at is exposure to environmental elements, including but not limited to wind, wave action, surge, currents, tide, or depth, property setbacks, shoreline protection, erosion preservation, marine life, navigation, boat traffic, vessel size, public access, beaches, general recreation, fishing, shell fishing, swimming, and the preservation of scenic vistas. So that's in the criteria of review for every application. So I think that is a more solid approach than having a definition that we could, that is only actually used in the legislation in one other place, where I actually think it needs to come out because it's conflicting with another section of code. So on page 8 is really the only time that that protected areas definition is used, and it's used under design and construction.
What paragraph?
It's 53A, 8A on page 8, 53,
Page
8A.
seven.
The
Oh,
design, yeah, oh, yeah, it's a
yeah,
little
so the
different. It's
online version's
design and
different.
construction of private and commercial lots.
Right,
So
53.8A.
53,
8A. And so what it says is a dock shall not be designed or constructed so as to be an impediment nor a hazard to navigation, nor constructed in protected areas as defined herein. I think that the nor constructed in protected areas as defined herein should come out because we don't actually have defined protected areas anywhere other than in the definition, and the definition doesn't define specific areas. So yeah, so I think that needs to come out.
Well, instead of just dropping protected areas, we might be able to work it in the language into legislative intent.
I mean, it's already in here when you read through it. I mean, you're looking at it.
Well, I think it's
Yeah, I mean,
important, it might be
it's
important to
already-
work it into legislative
Well,
intent.
it is already there, though.
It's in the
Like if
legislative
you
intent, but
take out the town board notes its concerns regarding the following areas, the whole section above is giving, inordinate wave action, boat traffic. So
Sufficient
it's
depth.
already there.
right.
And one of the things I think to keep in mind on this is because it's in section 5317 about the criteria to consider, this makes it more like a ZBA application. And if you've ever watched ZBA meetings, they sit and go through a list like, is this, owner, imposed, or
Is it
I'm trying to-
owner-created
Owner-created,
conflict
yeah.
or whatever?
Yeah, so they go through a whole list of things, and so I think having this section here accomplishes it, because that's where you can, on a case-by-case, location-by-location basis, take into account these things. Where if you go back, and that's in 5317, but if you go back to 53:8, it's a prohibition that they can't be constructed in protected areas, but we don't define exactly what a protected area is. And I thought about at one point in talking to Jack Costello at one point, the DEC already limits some areas, and it's SAV, and I can't remember what SAV stands for.
Submerged aquatic vegetation.
Yeah.
So they already will not allow an application to move forward in where they have defined
Okay.
protected areas. So I don't think we need to add that into ours, because at one point I thought, oh, would it hurt to just put that in? But if the DEC isn't going to allow the application to go forward to get to the town board, then why do we need to put it in? They won't come to us.
The definition may not be necessary, because
It's only used once, and
it's part of the legislative intent. But
One aspect of the definition of protected areas is the depth of water is insufficient. It's not mentioned on well.
It is.
I think that's in legislative
It is.
intent.
So it's mentioned as in A. So in 5317A, depth of water is one of the required criteria.
17.
5317.
Okay, the left
Yeah, there.
It's depth, yeah.
This is 19. 17A.
What is the downside to having it listed as a definition?
Is that it opens us up to, I think it's actually problematic because it's saying that we have this list, that we've developed and established this list of protected areas when we haven't. So, you know, without a list that we're going to update by resolution from time to time, which I think resolution alone might be questionable because it's going to impact, it should have a public hearing. I think that is more of a liability to us than anything else in this code. If we deny something saying it's in a protected area, I don't see how you win that in court based on what we have here and what we've done to establish this protected area.
Steve, do you have any thoughts on this?
Isn't the town board, if we do not grant a waiver, don't we have to
Stephen,
say why? What,
He's not muted now.
Stephen,
Yes,
do you have any thoughts on this subject that we're into here?
well, the legislative intent is not operative language. The legislative intent doesn't impose any duties. The operative language is in 53-17, which, as has already been said, sets forth the criteria for making the decision. And so I think streamlining the legislative intent is not a bad idea. You don't want language there that could lead to confusion or seem inconsistent with the operative language containing the criteria. So, generally, legislative intent is expressed in more general terms, overall goals and objectives, rather than specificity of the type that appears in that last portion of it.
Albert, you were starting to say something about waivers. I do have an issue with the waiver section.
Before we go there,
Oh,
yes.
Okay, well, I thought Albert was trying to get into this.
yeah, I just,
Let's see, your recommendation for the legislative intent paragraph is what exactly?
I have no, I have no problem removing the last sentence that specifies particular places in the town that the board is particularly concerned about. Because the general overall objective expresses the town's concerns, and the law contains criteria for deciding applications. So I don't think that last sentence really adds much.
Does that last sentence fit down in 5317? Are we losing something by taking it out? Do we move it somewhere else?
No,
No,
no.
I mean, if the board wanted to prohibit certain activities at certain locations, it certainly has the authority to do that. But I don't think this law, well, that would be a matter of your discretion. But as the law is currently drafted, without that kind of specific prohibition in particular places, I don't think you need to identify particular places.
Okay, so we dropped that last sentence. What about the definition of protected areas? It doesn't seem to be necessary to me.
Right, if you, I would compare the language in that definition with 53-17. If there's anything missing from 53-17 that appears in that definition, you can add it. But I agree that otherwise you don't need the definition.
I guess, Stephen, my only concern with the legislative intent, the last section, whatever last sentence or whatever it is moving forward, any future town board and any future member of the WMAC understands the concerns about these areas. There's always the waiver process that's open to an applicant to get a waiver for this. This just calls out concern for these areas, and it's conveyed to future board members or future WMAC committee members as well, being in the code. Without it, I don't think it loses its emphasis.
I mean, you certainly can keep that language in, but you're not, that's not regulatory language. You're not telling anybody what you command them to do with respect to those areas.
Well, can we put, I mean, it may not belong in legislative intent, sure, but that last sentence. But in 53-17, can't we say that we want to make the impression that we want them to look a little harder at certain areas?
But I think that the way 53-17 is written, it's going to force them to look equally hard at all areas, because in the old code, we didn't have any of this criteria. It was strictly length of the dock, depth of water. So for example, the Prager dock, which I was very frustrated by, and I felt like my hands were tied because everything about that dock met the code. However, it was illogical. So it would have been great to have voted no, but there's no defensible stance that the town could have taken in denying that dock. So this provides criteria by which, should the committee decide that it's appropriate to make a denial recommendation to the town board, you write that out, you send it to the town board, and now the town board has more of an option than we did in the past. So this criteria is going to allow for that more in-depth review that I think everybody is looking for.
So the Prager dock would fall under shoreline protection and erosion?
It would get evaluated under this criteria,
wave action.
waive the whole kit and caboodle. And
You know,
so,
one suggestion I might make in 53-17 is, rather than say in imposing restrictions or denying a permit, I would perhaps say in deciding a permit application.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay,
Let's make that change.
Yeah, and actually, that kind of leads to my, my question and concerns about where we have the waiver section, because we have it before, so it's in 53-13, and it talks about waivers, and I feel like this section should just be woven into 5317. Yeah, 5317 in how we decide, because we're going to decide whether or not to grant an application. Like, why are we having someone come back for a waiver? Like, let's just be tougher with the applications themselves and not let them have another bite at the apple with a waiver.
You don't like the location of where it is.
Yeah, I think it needs, at a minimum, it needs to be moved to after 5317. But I'm also wondering whether or not it should just be incorporated.
I know this is not going to be popular, but I agree with you. And I agree with you. And the issue is that. And I don't agree with you at this moment in time. I don't think there's any harm in taking those things out of the intent, those locations.
No, I agree.
I know what to me, there should definitely not be anything built there, okay? But I think this is what do we call this? This is a compromise or something, and I think you still have all the control in the world, okay? And I think that we're playing a little bit of semantics, but you have the control, because it doesn't mean you say you cannot not allow a dock in those areas. But I think that, I don't know whether it's necessary, and I think since it's such a hot button issue, I think that would
It's
resolve.
definitely a hot button issue because it's listed there.
Yeah.
I mean, but interesting, one of the members of the WMAC came up after arguing about this, came up and said that he believes, that there's areas that you shouldn't have a dock. So it kind of, what do you, I was confused by that.
Is there a sense?
He's arguing against this, but then he said, well, there are areas where we'll recommend that you don't need a dock.
Right.
We would recommend a dock.
That would fall under 17.
I also would note that you have very specific and well thought out criteria for deciding the application, but only a vague statement about what would justify a waiver. Is this a hardship waiver? I don't know what is intended by the phrase unique conditions. I think that would justify a waiver. Of course, the town board is the one ultimately making that decision. Very often in land use regulations, such as when a moratorium is imposed, you generally see the regulation include a waiver based on hardship. Now, hardship could be a basis for a waiver. Of course, you'd want to balance it against the criteria that you've developed here. But I do have, I do think that waiver section needs to be either moved, eliminated, or better focused.
Right. 'Cause I think part of the complication when we were looking at the reason why the waiver section is separate and distinct in this, as opposed to other legislations where it's kind of part of the criteria, or just like a sub-sentence underneath the criteria, like a waiver may be granted for hardships or XYZ, was because the original concept of the protected areas and a prohibition period of construction in those areas then warranted a waiver, because you couldn't just come to the board with an actual permit application because you've already been denied in code, so you had to apply with a waiver, which seems unfair. I feel like every application should go through the same process. So for example, you apply for a building permit and you get a denial letter. Here you apply for your dock permit and maybe you get denied, and then you can always appeal that denial. So it's like you have to come up with a process that's consistent for everybody so that you don't have people claiming unfair treatment, So I think that the criteria we've established is very good, and I think it'll be thorough. But I just want to make sure we're not actually building in problems that could get us in trouble.
Get denials on waivers on a regular basis. That's what you're talking about.
Or get a suit on a regular basis because people are saying we haven't treated them fairly. We treated their neighbor differently because they were around the corner. You know, I want to make sure that everybody's getting the same review.
So Meg, let me ask this question. Let's assume we took the waivers out, we took some of this language out, and we passed this thing.
Mhm.
This is, again, aren't these living documents?
Yeah.
And it is something that can be revisited, but so as to get this thing moved and stamped and move forward, okay, and sort of have peace and let's get back to real life, okay?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be the way to go here?
That's hopefully the goal. Yeah, yeah.
So,
Love to do that. Yeah,
So,
Yeah, we don't want the perfect to get in the way of the good.
right.
exactly,
But I don't want to put something out there that has known,
no meat to it.
or known complications, like it's going to create an issue.
So we're making changes to this?
Yeah,
yeah,
So
well,
we'll have to have another hearing.
yes.
All right,
But
here's,
hopefully that'll be the
here's,
final.
somebody made a point, and I thought it was interesting.
Mhm.
One of the individuals at the hearing said that he thought there should be a 2-year
Yes.
waiting period, and I thought that was a good point.
Oh, that's,
and other people have made the point that there should be no waiting period.
yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
I think it should be a 5-year waiting period.
I just left that alone at 1.
what's the advantage of the 2-year?
A longer time duration
And what's the,
to
what's,
experience the weather, the conditions. of
so
the
so they're not prematurely doing something at a time.
Without knowing what it's like to live there year round and see.
Makes some sense. I don't think
I
that's,
don't know, it's not a big deal, I just thought we're changing it, I'm just throwing it at the table, that's all.
if you're 92, it may be a
And as
problem. Okay, but,
you mentioned the dock application, that the WMAC said no and presented to the town board, and the town board voted, okay, go ahead with it. And, I don't know.
Well, another thing that did get brought up, I think it was Angelo at the public hearing said that the permit should be for 2 years instead of 1 year. So, I mean, depending on the time of year that you issue the permit, it might take them longer than a year to actually do the dock. So, I mean, it kind of makes sense to make
Yeah,
that
Actually,
2 year.
that was the point I actually liked.
Yeah, I know.
I just got a permit for
Because it
somewhere else.
may not get done in 1 year.
Right.
3-year permit.
Yeah, yeah. So I thought a 2-year permit made sense, and then instead of every year coming back to get a renewal on it.
That's, oh, wait, so where is that?
That is
It's on page 7. It's
Yeah,
53-7. Permit issuance.
Oh, no, hold on.
so it might be on your page 6.
Yeah,
I feel like you guys are one page.
I'm still working with the strikeouts because I like that.
Oh,
Page
so it's
6.
53-7. Permit issuance terms.
Okay,
53.7C.
53.7C.
What, 24 months?
24 months, yeah.
So this will have to go for another hearing?
Yeah.
Yep,
But hopefully that'll be the last one.
Mhm.
so wait, hold on, so let's go back to the top.
I was gonna say, yeah, I've
Yeah.
got some other things
So
too.
if we're gonna take out this last sentence,
Mhm.
I still think we should move it somewhere else, but for now, we'll take it out.
Legislation intent the town board and
Yeah.
go all out.
That's out.
The next thing is the definition
Yes,
on page 3.
Protected
We're gonna
areas.
take that out, and then it was used in what paragraph?
it was used
8,
in
53.8?
53.8A.
53A.
There it is,
Got
first
it.
sentence.
And so we are just taking out that last bit.
Right.
Yes,
Or constructed,
in protected areas is defined here.
line construction.
You're taking that out?
Yes.
How's it going?
So Stephen, you don't like my idea of trying to work in a statement of our concern for certain areas?
Well, I mean, if you wanted to regulate in those areas in some way, that would be an appropriate thing to say in a code section. A statement of concern over specific areas doesn't really give instructions to staff or to future boards.
I think we should start with this and then see if that's necessary. We may find that this is enough criteria to make that not necessary.
Okay, so we take up, what's next? What's the next change?
The next change is section 53.5, docking permit required fees, temporary use. Down in sections C and D. Angelo had made the comment about the Daring Harbor dock, town dock, between May 15th rather than June 15th.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
So
that's
anywhere where
fine.
we've got June,
No
there's like 4
problem.
places.
maybe switch
So
that
in
to May.
C2, C3, D2, D3.
And it goes from June to May
Yeah.
Yes.
and all those?
Yes.
Amber, is that problematic for your office? No?
And that's C2 and C3, and where else is it?
D2 and D3.
D2, D3.
The next one that I had, unless somebody's earlier, is 53-6, under permit application.
Yep.
So under C,
Sorry, this one's 53.
53-6,
Gotcha.
C,
C.
C1A, a certified survey of the owner's property.
Got it.
We need to.
Extend the lines out to the water.
Yes, exactly.
Yep.
That makes total sense. And it's actually the practice of the committee now anyway.
Yes,
Right. So instead of having to request it every time, make it part of the code and they just know they have to do it. Another one right in that area, for 53-6C2A, where it says specifications for the construction materials to be used. Do we want to say that something like, we recommend treated lumber only be used on pilings and stringers? Everything else should be untreated lumber, like the decking should be untreated. If you're doing a bulkhead, the bulkhead sheathing should be either a plastic material or some kind of untreated material. And just the pilings are allowed to be treated. Do we want to put something like that in here?
Well, again, I wouldn't make recommendations in a law.
Okay.
I would impose requirements and restrictions in a law.
Okay.
If you want to. I mean, you may not want to do that. You've delegated to a board the role of evaluating applications and imposing conditions on applications that they grant.
Yeah, if that's,
Yeah, my question on this one is, we've put in that they have to include the specifications of the materials to be used, but then we don't say anything about why that's required. Like, so I feel like if we're going to require it, at least give them a heads up that the committee will review it, or we have certain restrictions.
Well, maybe in the criteria for deciding the application, you should add something about
Yeah.
materials.
Good point. But
Where would that show again?
in the criterion,
So under 5317,
I put under B, materials used. Construction.
yes,
17B,
Yeah,
yeah.
materials used.
it's one of the things that should be evaluated.
Oh, yeah. It's a good change.
I like that
that's a good
suggestion.
place.
It's a good change.
Okay. We already changed the months to 24 and 75.
53-9.
Yeah, I just had one comment about, there was a comment about,
53 now? Oh,
Existing docks.
yeah. There was just one comment about public notice. So having to notify the neighbors if you're doing a dock application.
yeah.
There was a question about that procedure, but I just wanted to note it's the same procedure that's used for the ZBA and other types of site plan review applications and stuff like that. So it's not unusual, it's a
You're not
common
asking for anything, right? You're not asking for anything unusual, right?
But is that criteria, does it still make sense in today's world? Isn't it 200 feet or something like that?
Yeah, it's 200 feet of the property involved in the
I
application,
think it makes sense.
notifying all the neighbors.
Yeah, and the reason I think it should stay in there is you have property owners who don't want the dock in the middle of their property. They want to shift it over as far as possible because they don't want to look at it. So like
So
they're
why do we
shifting,
have to?
so why should the neighbor like not have notice that that their view may be impacted?
Well, no, the question is, should it be 500 feet?
It's a document.
Well, the question is, should it be 500 feet, but then it'd be different than everything else.
We have to eliminate 60-foot yachts at the dock.
They have to have the appropriate depth for that.
And do we have any enforcement? Let's talk about this for 1 second. I know it's off the subject matter, but if a dock is given and it's for a specific size boat, and they use a different size boat, is that allowable?
Not given for a specific size.
It's not given for, but,
A mooring
but they,
maybe.
but they give,
A mooring maybe.
but they give the dock based on that, they're telling them that this is a size boat, but they put a bigger boat there.
There's no.
Well,
enforcement.
I don't think that's done.
In granting the particular application, you can impose a condition, a restriction. And
Is
if
this
the
an-
restriction is violated, they
Okay.
can, then enforcement action would be appropriate.
Do we need to add something to 17 then for that?
I think that you list it in the resolution.
That would just be a condition of the resolution, I think.
I think we did that with Ramshead.
Okay.
I mean, it's hard for that, like, if the property sells and the new owner has a different size boat, then, you
The
know,
vessel size is in C.
it's
Yeah.
easy.
Mhm.
Navigation, boat traffic vessel club.
Well, you know, the decision granting the application would go in the building department file, wouldn't it? And really, the responsibility, it's the responsibility of a purchaser to do their due diligence. There would be a public record of the restriction, and they should take a look at what's in the building department file before they purchase.
Yeah.
Where is this restriction? Where would this be?
It's
well,
in
it's in the-
5317, the criteria.
17.
It's in the
It's in
criteria.
there already,
Yeah.
and it'll be in the resolution.
Yeah.
So where do we leave off?
53.9, existing docks.
A1. We have or repaired, but we should, or repaired or replaced,
In kind, in place.
We got.
yeah, in kind of place.
That-
That conforms it to another section.
Then it needs to be
Similar.
the freshwater dock, which is 5310B1, where it can be repaired or replaced in kind and place. So it just makes the two
It mirrors it.
the same.
Wait, what are you adding?
So for
So
53.9 existing docks,
Yep.
A1.
A1,
it says maintained, repaired, or replaced in kind in place.
yep,
Which mirrors the language.
that's what it says.
No.
Does it have or replaced?
And my version
Yeah,
doesn't.
mine does maintained or repaired, not replaced, actually.
Oh, yeah, so
or
this is
replaced.
like, yeah, in place, in kind.
Yeah,
So you want to add replaced?
or replaced, or, repaired or replaced. Which then conforms it to the freshwater dock language,
Right.
which says repaired or replaced.
In kind and in place.
In
Yep.
kind and in place, yeah.
Got it. If it exists, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Do we need to, in the freshwater?
But if it's non-conforming to the new code and it gets wiped out, don't we want the new replacement to conform? You have 120-foot dock and big storm, no more dock.
That falls under,
Well, the structures are still there.
That's under A3. If you look at A3,
Hmm.
Yeah, that includes like active dock.
yeah, that's got the 50% or more of the original structure.
No, the supporting members, so all the decking is blown away. But the supporting members are still sticking out of the water. And the code now is 100 feet. Don't we want the replacement to conform to the 100 feet, or do you?
Well, if they're just replacing the decking,
it's in kind.
it's kind of a repair. I mean, it's like, it's not like you lost all the pilings with everything. You know, if they cut, like, let's say it's 120 foot, so you're just gonna have two random pilings sticking out in the middle of nowhere, and the dock's gonna end early because nobody ever pulls those out, and they just become a hazard over time.
Well, it'll be hazard to the landowner's boat. That's about it.
Yeah.
Speaking of repair,
I don't care.
it was also brought up the amount, the total cost for such repair exceeds $10,000. Either be up,
Right.
because if someone's just repairing the plank, the decking, that's gonna be over $10,000.
Yeah, I think the thought with that is if you're only replacing a few boards here and
And it
there,
shouldn't
then
have
it
a
shouldn't
permit.
require a permit, you can kind of do that yourself. it should be less than 10 grand to do 5 boards on it.
Yeah, I'm not sure we need to change it here.
The only other thing I had, which, you know, might just be related to touch, is the Y valves,
Give me a paragraph number.
5311, regulations regarding living or residing on boats at docks.
Yeah,
It just, 5311C, any boat equipped with a head docked within the waters of the town of Shelter Island. I don't know how enforceable or like reasonable it is to think that our bay constables are gonna be going on boats and checking live valves and checking logs and, you know, if.
they actually
someone-
do.
But if someone never uses their head, is that more of a Coast Guard thing
It's
though?
more of a
Or is that,
But,
I mean, if it's
it's
Coast
happened
Guard, then
before.
let Coast Guard do it. I don't know. I don't want to waste our guys' time if it's not something that's their jurisdiction per se.
No, it's in our waters, it is their jurisdiction, they've done it. And
Okay,
they've done it to friends of mine.
yeah.
I mean, I think it's fine, I don't
right, I
think
mean,
it's
it
worth
is-
worrying about.
I don't vote, so that's why I'm asking. So I wasn't sure how,
Something
like,
you should ask Bo
how
how.
feasible or reasonable it is to have that as a requirement. I mean, I think of course it's good practice,
Yeah,
but I just wasn't sure if it was something that we want to codify.
gotta get down the water, man. We live on an island.
I know. I like to swim.
Okay. I mean, I don't think you need to worry about that one.
All right, that's fine. I wanted to bring it up because it got brought up again in the hearing and.
That's all that I had.
Yeah, me too.
I have a question. So, I think that was it. Okay.
Did anyone else have
I'm
anything?
just, Ben's looking.
No, I'm just. I have to losing my sentence out of the legislative intent. I'm gonna have to live with it, I guess.
I'm just gonna get water. So we can move on to committee memberships?
Sure, when I'm angry.
Oh, there was a question brought up at the hearing about commercial docks and how it only says that they're in B zone, like a commercial dock can only be in B zone. It asks about all the existing docks, and I just wanted to know that those are all pre-existing.
Pre-existing, non-conforming.
So any changes they wanted to make, they'd have to come before the board
Yes.
to get a request to make those changes. So
I think that's okay.
I think that's fine.
Yeah.
But before we go into the committee report, I've asked Stephen, we were working on something to change some reimbursement for our environmental reviews. I asked him to speak to the board about proposing something for legislation,
The resolution.
for a resolution. Could he interject here at this point?
Let's continue with the agenda just to get Amber's committee stuff and
Okay.
then before we do board member reports.
Okay.
Yeah,
So we're done with the dock code.
we're done with
Yeah.
that
I
part.
just have one more public hearing, and
Yeah,
then we
so-
never have to speak of it again.
Hopefully,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
I would love that.
So, Stephen, you'll need to incorporate the changes from today, get us back a draft, we'll post it again,
I'll send it.
and then,
Steve and I can send you the notes.
we'll
Your
just-
notes are always extremely helpful. Thank you.
All right.
And we'll just put it on the agenda briefly for next week, just to make sure, like, the changes
I'm gonna email
Stephen
it to
makes
you right now.
Are good.
I took notes on the document in red, and I'm going to email it to you.
Brilliant.
Kevin, can I screen share?
So, next item on the agenda is committee memberships.
Or I can send it to
So
you.
Amber had gone through some of these. It looks like your slide has all of them in one place, but we can skip over the ones you previously covered.
I forgot where I left. I think it was WK. It's through Kevin for a little, so sorry.
You have this in a printed form, or is it only in slide?
I only have it in slide, I didn't print it, I should have.
Yeah, you sent it to me and I did print it. Because I like to make marks.
Easier just. Yeah. How does it go bigger?
What?
How to make it?
It should be at the bottom. Is that Word you have?
If you go slideshow, up top. Over, down. There you go. I'm like over, down, hotter, colder.
Thank you.
There you go.
Send it to everybody, just in case somebody missed something. so
Thank you, Ben.
I can have a look at it.
I don't remember if I did EMS. I know I did this. So EMS Advisory Board, established in 2011. Members to serve term of 2 years. That was all that was written.
Did we go over Westlake Water District? That's a slide before. Okay, I just couldn't remember.
I made sure because I know that's a hot topic. Right. And then the committee members, all to expire December 31st of
25.
Yeah.
All right.
Taylor's Island, established in 2005, and committee members to serve a term of 3 years by resolution number 633. That's all that she wrote on that one.
So
Some
we
of
have 4 expiring next year. So we should try to stagger those as we reappoint them.
Yes.
So it's like 2 a year instead of majority of the board.
Is there anyone that wants to serve on that committee? Do
On
we have any new people or just,
Taylor's Island?
yeah,
It's been the same.
that committee works pretty well.
They
Yeah, no, and actually, they have the foundation, and so oftentimes, if there is an exit from this board, there's somebody from the foundation who's been involved and ends up coming in. I believe that's how,
Okay.
And Green Options, established in 2008, serve 3 years. Initial members to stagger terms of 1, 2, and 3 years, expiring May 10th of the expiration year. And then established 7 members in 2022. So as you see, they're not staggered.
So, yeah, that's another one. And they don't expire May 10th. Some are September, some are October.
Yeah.
I think maybe
yeah, so we'll work on conforming those. Yeah, so after today, we just wanted to this is the status of everything. And then Amber and I are gonna sit down and figure out how to work this out and come up with a plan. Some people will probably just wait until their terms are up and we'll consult with Steve as well. Wait till their terms are up, but then they won't get appointed.
Staggered.
Don D'Amato expires May 10th, 2026. We'll suggest that actually, May 10th is
Yeah.
charity. October 31st, when she gets reappointed, she'll be appointed to a May term. So it'll be half a year short.
Should be like a holdover and then, or
Just half a year.
end
Yeah,
short,
half a year short. So it won't be a full year for that one. Okay. Keep going.
License Review Board, established in 1975 per local law number 1. It consists of 3 to 5 members. No member to serve more than 2 years unless reappointed by the town board. Members to be residents. And then they established board terms to be scheduled for 3 years in 2003. And then 1 member to be a current home improvement contractor or retired home improvement contractor by local law 16/2024.
I'm not sure I understand the third bullet, no member to serve more than 2 years unless reappointed by the town board. Aren't all members always appointed by the town board?
Yeah, I just put it in because that's what was in the resolution.
Right. Okay,
And that was from 1975, so.
right.
Didn't have cell phones back then.
Yeah.
Didn't have a resolution number either.
So,
Okay, so we actually, go back a slide, so when we did the resolutions last week, we appointed Paul for a term longer than, and Peter for a term longer than they should be.
Because you were trying to stagger them, that's what.
Right, yeah.
that's fine.
Oh, but then this established 4 terms just scheduled for 3 years.
That was in 1975.
Okay. All right, so then we're okay then.
Well, yeah, we'll
And then
have.
in 2003, they did
I just
3
was
years.
reading that too quickly. Okay. I think we're okay then.
Recreation Commission, established 1974. They appointed 7 members with staggered terms. In 2003, they increased the membership from 7 to 11 members, terms to be for 5 years and expire on December 31st. 2015, they decreased membership from 11 to 7, and then 2022, decreased membership from 7 to 5.
Well, we've been talking about dissolving this commission because it's not really needed anymore.
Because we have a rec department?
Correct.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was more helpful when we just kind of had the fit center, and when Garth was running it, a lot of people helped coming up with programming and stuff, but now that we've really formalized the rec department, we kind of don't need this commission. We've been meeting, I think we met 4 times last year, and we canceled most of the meetings because there was really nothing to discuss. Bethany had it completely handled and programming had already been done, so we really just met once in the fall to talk about how summer went, and once in the spring to talk about what summer's gonna look like. So I mean, their big thing is always finding lifeguards, but you don't really need a whole committee to just talk about the fact that we have trouble finding lifeguards.
What do we have to do to kill it?
Just a resolution to dissolve it, I think.
Let's do it.
Mhm.
You guys okay with that?
And they're all in agreement
Yeah.
with this, I mean,
Yeah, we talked about it last year, actually, and we're like, well, maybe we'll just cut it down to 2 meetings a year and see, and then everyone's like, this is silly.
How many committees do we have? 24?
Too many.
So now we have 1 less. So resolution next town board meeting?
You know, as an alternative to a resolution dissolving the entity, you can just leave the seats vacant. You don't have to populate it.
Yeah, but the last one expires August 7th, 2028, so it would just sort of be hanging out there.
Okay.
Appointment liaison.
Right.
Community
They
president,
still want town board liaisons for the department.
Yeah,
It's just, it won't be in the top half of the liaison appointments in their committees, it'll be
It's the
down.
bottom one.
yeah.
Yeah, which is, there's no set meeting terms.
And who are the liaisons? Don't tell me it's me.
It's me and, maybe.
Trying to remember, oh, it should be on the
Albert
website.
Gordon? No, I have. Gordon and myself.
I think I gave my seat to you.
So it's
or
just
your
me.
backup.
I mean, I got it. I'm not worried about it. I got it.
There you go.
I can do it. I mean, Bethany and I, we're good.
I was gonna say, yeah, only the primary has to go,
Yeah.
and second subs when needed.
Do we have primaries?
Yeah.
That's how they were appointed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't remember seeing, I don't
The
know.
last resolution.
I don't know whether I'm primary on any of them or secondary.
Theoretically, I'm still the secondary on WAC, right?
I think so.
Amber refuses to take me off.
Yes, yes.
WAC?
No, you're not on,
You're not on
CAC.
WAC.
No, CAC is myself and I think,
No, WAC.
oh,
You're not on WAC.
No. Or West Tech Water.
I'm on CAC.
Oh, who knows?
yeah, that's right, you're on CAC.
We'll have to resend the resolution so you can see what you're primary on and what you're secondary on.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I have it printed out and taped to my desk.
Yeah. I
Can we back up one?
Yeah, I just skipped one.
What's that one?
Community
We got something to do here. Oh, my God. No, they're all,
They're all
we need to stagger them.
2025.
We've got a lot of 2025, so
They expired already,
yeah, we
so.
need to just restagger them
Okay.
and find a farmer.
Yeah,
I thought you found one.
And we have one,
we have one
application
applicant.
so
We have
far.
to interview.
Did you talk to Ariel? It was,
I don't know.
Uh,
This one is pretty straightforward.
I mean, it's all.
Yeah.
Local law, town law.
Talk to the matter.
Do we have
I
two
mean, maybe Steve will do it.
for this?
Only one of them was a farmer, I think.
That's true, it doesn't matter.
One of them was. Or did he apply for something else? I have to,
We'll go through.
I'm not sure, actually.
I was gonna pull that.
Two, I don't-
I only remember seeing one, but so many have come through lately for like,
Yeah.
What's this Board of Assessment review?
So that's real property tax law. It's how it's established. One member appointed for a term of 5, 3, and 1 years, which was, but by the law, it's 6 years.
okay,
So they are appointed 6 years. I need to adjust a couple of these that I've caught, just by resolution to amend them.
okay.
But
Were they
then,
not approved for six, like they weren't appointed for 6
it
years?
was 5
or-
years.
Yeah.
It was per previous
The old law.
one, so
Okay,
it's just an amendment.
right.
They still, and those members are all active?
Yeah,
Yes.
they're required to take certain training every
Right.
Yeah.
year. Board of Ethics, this one got kind of intense. So previous board and code was repealed and replaced by local law number 6. I forgot to put the year. Board consists of 5 members with a staggered 5-year terms. And no person should be appointed as member of Board of Ethics who is current town officer of local, county, or state political party, or entering a campaign race for public office, or as campaign manager, consultant, treasurer for political party.
So I mean, someone almost needs to resign?
I addressed it, but yes, correct. And then you have to fill the seat.
Right.
Wait, who has two persons?
Shelby.
Shelby.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So then you have to advertise for that.
Yeah.
Health and Wellness Committee, the newest one, established by resolution number 63. Committee to include town social worker and a representative from senior center, 5-year staggered terms, and appointed 6 members.
Representative to the senior center, okay. Know
We have to fix,
Yeah, there's.
Trish is not ex officio.
What did I miss?
Yeah, we adopted that one last week.
I thought she was
I
a term.
think that,
Ex officio is
Paula would be, just because she's.
Paula and
Paula.
senior center.
Oh, Trisha's got in there twice.
oh, yeah, Trish is in there twice, so it.
Oh, that was my
Trish
copy
should
and
be-
paste,
Trish should be.
trying to put everyone in line.
Lori Finelli,
Yes.
that second,
She got it.
ex officio should be Lori Finelli.
Got it.
that?
That makes sense.
Yes, that was my, trying to fit everything on there. Community Housing Board, established by local law number 5 in 2008, consists of 5 residents, 4-year term staggered. Amended in 2016, that no member of the town board, planning board, zoning board of appeals shall serve on the community housing board. 2018, they increased membership from 5 to 7. 2019, decreased membership from 7 to 5. 2023, increased membership from 5 to 7.
Could we say you can have anywhere from 5 to 7 members on the board, so we don't have to keep switching this back and forth? Is that a thing?
It's fine,
Yeah.
or 7.
Okay.
Can't be, because then that would include 6.
Yeah, an even number would be a mistake, but.
Hmm.
Okay, it's
How many members are currently there?
7.
There's 7, but one is,
In government, do you have, if you say a board has 7 members.
The 2, I can't, with the,
You have to have 7
That is
members.
full if you can.
Well, in private sector, you don't have to fill the seats.
but it can run into problems with quorums.
Right.
Because if you have established 7, then you need 4 people to create a
Oh,
quorum.
that's required.
So if you only have 6 people or 5 people, getting 4 out of 5 or 4 out of 6 becomes harder.
That's not how it works.
Right, you not only need 4, you not only need 4 to establish a quorum, but you need 4 votes in favor for anything to carry.
Right,
You got it.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's the complication.
Which is why we had this fluctuation over the years, because But I think that the current work of the Community Housing Board, like there's energy and there's forward motion. So it's now something that people want to be a part of. So I think we will be able to maintain 7 people.
Yeah. So we'll have to advertise for Maria's position because she doesn't
she's
want to
not-
reappoint.
yes.
She's not coming back?
No,
No.
she's gotten very, very busy in life.
That's all she wrote. Those are all committee.
Questions. Who's that, who's leaving?
Maria?
Okay,
Who are the other members?
I can't see below Bill.
It's Bran Doherty Johnson, Mark Mobius, David Doyle, Bill Maestro, Elizabeth Hanley, and Peter McCracken.
Okay, all right, couldn't see that.
I don't know why.
So we'll have one opening there.
Yes.
Didn't you send that, didn't you send, no, you didn't send anything, somebody on housing, we never just opened that up, okay.
So next week I'll have one of my handy dandy spreadsheets that shows how we're going to restagger things and when it will take place, so that we'll have a blueprint for going forward and then generate
Oh, wait,
any
that's it?
resolutions that we.
That's it.
Yeah. So
What
any,
about the,
Comprehensive. That's the only one I didn't do because it was done.
the document I sent around last week?
so we already covered half of these
Mhm.
a couple of weeks ago, so now Amber just finished going through the rest, so now we'll sit down and go through every single, she and I will sit down and go through every single one and come up with a plan for.
That'll be part of the plan for solving it then,
Yes,
your email.
yes. Okay. So now, before we go to board member reports, you wanted to, Stephen, comment on,
Yes, thank you. Both Gordon and Amber asked me to make the resolution permitting the town to pass along the cost of its environmental review a priority. And this afternoon, I drafted the resolution. I just need to proof it, and then I will forward it for review. So that we'll be able to check that box. And assuming that the resolution meets with your approval, or if not, it can be modified based upon your comments, we can put it on the agenda for next week's board meeting.
yeah.
Thank you, that's great.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Stephen.
Okay, so you're starting to knock off that list I gave you.
I am. I'll have some questions and comments on some other matters, such as the community center policy.
Okay. Great. All right. Board member reports. I think I had anything last week.
Last week wasn't.
Yeah, but
I didn't put anything in my folder to bring, so.
it was a very quiet week.
No, just congratulations to the assessor's office for getting all their mailings out. That was a lot.
Yeah, that was a heroic effort by many, many people.
Stuffing envelopes.
Yes.
I bet you checked to make sure I got the right one.
We tried to be really good about that.
Yeah, actually, yeah, the ZBA met last week. And yeah, that was the only committee meeting last week, so. Okay.
I have one item.
What?
I have one item that I talk about. This has to deal with Gardens Bay Country Club. Okay. I want to talk about the grocer reports. Okay. There was a report that was done by Grocer, okay, that I got a copy of, but was never put on the town website because the application changed at the last minute and they wanted to remove something from it, okay? But we have the report, okay? And just because they pulled it and they said it's not going to be existing, we do have the report. And I think that should be a public report,
Is that a final report or is that?
So you
that's
can't use it,
preliminary?
you can't use it as a public report because now it's null because they're
Right.
completely changing it. So everything that's in there, they can't be held to.
Well, we don't have the new, and then that was gonna ask, I was gonna ask the other question is, who authorizes them going back to PW Grosser for another report?
We did, because the application changed.
When you say
So-
we, you did? Or so, who does that
They
here?
have to in general because they need to formalize a report. So since the application changed, they're still held to that report.
Like the board hired Grosser to do the review. So when the applicant amended the application to remove recharge collection as part of the application, then that forces Grosser to go back and update their report to reflect the actual application.
I got it, but
Otherwise, the report they're giving us doesn't make sense for the application we're
well,
reviewing.
it doesn't make sense for it on the revision of removing
Right.
water collection, but if there was water collection and we already paid for the report, okay, the taxpayers paid for that report, why is that not, that should be available to the public?
They've indicated that that's gonna be possibly a phase 2.
Yeah.
They're not gonna do it in the initial application, but they wanna bring it back in a couple of years or whatever they wanna do, that's still part of what they'd like to do, they intend on doing.
But then it would get reviewed
So-
at that point. If that's no longer the
Who made the
ask.
decision? That's all. Did you make it, Amber, or the two of you, or who made the decision?
So PW Grosser, they get the application, they review it, they have preliminary, it's not finalized until after the public hearing is closed. So then PW Grosser gives us information that the applicant then has to respond to, but they submitted something and that information, new information got given to PW Grosser. So then they said, oh, okay, so what we just had done is off the table, so now we have to rework our report.
What took place in this issue, though, that again, I'm just looking at the timeframe. The golf course responded to that long list of questions from Hay Beach, in which case they said, no, we're pulling it, okay, it doesn't exist. But there's two pieces here. One is that we've gone through the expense and we paid for this. Okay, so, and then they changed at the last minute, but we already provided the service, we ordered it, and it cost us money for that report. So really, the question is, somehow or other, you change it at the last minute, one day, and we get the report the following day, they should be liable for that report. That's number one.
When we do our fees,
No, not when we do our fees, but even in this case, okay, for them to change it at the last minute, we've already gone through the process, ordered it from PW Grosser, are paying them for the report, and they're saying the day before we receive it, all bets are off.
Your mind?
I mean, I don't know about that one, okay, but even though we don't, but that's needless here and there, but the thing is that during the Gardeners Bay thing, they changed it, but the original thing this was in it, and they basically said that this is, right now, it's not part of the permit, which I completely understand, and I think it's not that report should be taken, that's not the evaluation you're doing right now, but I think the report, since we paid for it, and it really goes into the next process or the next step, which is going to come down the road, it should be open to the public, or at least be available to the people who have responded, okay? Because it's coming back.
They've indicated it.
Yes, they said it.
But then it would be released on that application. when they did the
But here's part of the thing. So every application you get, that you have a public hearing and it's contentious like this, and there's a lot of back and forth, there are modifications made to the plan. Even planning board and ZBA have modifications made to the plans throughout the process to get their permit, right? So it's whatever the final modification is, the final product is what ends up getting ruled on, right? So we're in the middle of reviewing the Gardeners Bay application site plan, right? So as we're going through the process, the Gardeners Bay Country Club is realizing this aspect of our ask is controversial. We don't want it, we'll pull it out. So the ask is now reduced by that.
Right.
So eventually it'll end up, whatever that final ask ends up being is
Got it.
what we're ruling on. So if we go and put out reports from Grosser on every single iteration, I think it's gonna get confusing for the public as to what the actual ask is in the end.
But it
I'm
wasn't.
not saying we don't have to or we can't, I'm just saying, like, I think it might create confusion.
I completely understand that, okay, but I just think that for that not to be, because later on, the message that's being sent out is that because there is this conflict and the people are concerned about collection, they pulled it immediately on the 20th of the month. On the 20th of the month, we had a meeting on the 24th when it came out. So what I'm just saying, I think that since we paid it, it belongs to us, okay? And I think there should be no reason why that information shouldn't be available to the public. And even if it's on a FOIL basis, they should be able to really have access to public.
That specific report is null, so I wouldn't release it anyway because it's a void. It's not.
Well, the report is not void. The void is still a
Because
void
it's
report.
being revised.
Actually, the Freedom of Information Law doesn't make a distinction between drafts on the one hand and final documents on the other. If it's a record in the possession of the town and there isn't a category that FOIL permits the town to withhold, then the document is available for public inspection and copying.
Yeah, so I mean, if someone.
I just think it's important that later on, we know that things change and they can come back a year from now and say, hey, this is what we want. We already have the report. That's all I'm saying.
But that would.
That's not valid at that particular time. I understand that, but the report should be available. That's what I'm trying to say. So they would have to FOIL for it if they wanted.
Are the prior plans on the website still? Before they took off the recapture?
Good point.
Because if they are, then we should put the report on. And just note that it reflects
Yeah.
that plan.
Or you could put something on the report that this is outdated, not up to date.
Just gets confusing for the public when we have documents up that don't actually pertain to the application that's being, like the ask.
The next,
So Stephen, in this case, someone cancels at last minute. I know we don't have the legislation in for reimbursement for engineering, for environmental. But in this particular case, when somebody calls and says, hey, I don't, we changed our mind, we don't need it anymore, but we've already gone through the trouble of paying for that report.
cisterns.
Is there no obligation on the applicant to make the town whole, even though we don't have that in the law at this particular time?
Not without the resolution in place, but there is something you may wish to consider. I think I raised this at a previous meeting. You may want applicants to post a deposit at the time of their application. So if
Right.
the application is withdrawn, for example, the town can still be reimbursed for its costs. I did not put that in the draft that I prepared today. I can add that if you wish.
Yes, please.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
It is, all the iterations are up here. The original application's on here, the revision, the 1/14/25 is on here, the response letters, the submission on 2/20/25 is on here. The as-built irrigation's up here, so yeah,
So let's put
the records,
So the only thing that's
Put the
not there
grocery
is.
report on, just make sure it's clearly marked as.
Or you can
referred
mark
to.
something on it that says, that it's not applicable to the application.
Yeah, and this way it's out there.
Yeah.
People can
Yeah,
foil
I
it
mean,
anyway. Let's
yeah.
just stick it
Yeah,
up there.
I'll reach out to Kim Gennaro and ask her, like, if she, like, any special wording or.
I would suggest that perhaps the word superseded is the one that you want to use.
Proceeding. Good.
Okay.
Anything else before we go into executive session?
Not for me.
Nope. Okay. All right, thank you, everybody. We're gonna go into, entertain a motion to go into executive session to discuss the employment history of an employee.
So move.
Second, all in favor?
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
We'll keep you on.